Please call the roll.
Rahman. Present. Long.
Here?
Markham.
Here.
Russ will be joining us shortly.
Okay.
Oh, we only have three. Wow. Our three dedicated today. Just kidding.
All right, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
So I want to welcome our Corporation Counsel and our Risk Management Departments to our budget hearings. This is our last day. So we're really interested to hear what you have to say. We've had a couple of things percolate up from the other groups that I have questions about, so we're real interested in hearing your presentation, and then we'll have questions afterwards, so.
So you have things that have percolated up from others that you are gonna ask us about?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Clear? Okay, got it.
Another surprise.
Got it. Good morning, Sullivan
Oh,
Phillips
a surprise. Yeah.
Corporation, or good afternoon, Sullivan Phillips Corporation Counsel.
Aaron Thomas, Deputy Corporation Counsel.
Diana McBroom, Director of Risk Management.
So it's our pleasure to be with you today.
Right.
Want to kind of provide an overview of what we were able to focus on last year. Some of the things we intend to focus on going into the new fiscal year, but wanted to start by talking generally about what we do as a risk management and corp counsel and the importance of it. You know, we're here today to talk about the financial resources that will be allocated to us for the next fiscal year. But you know, one of the things that we sometimes, corp counsel or risk management, don't get to talk about is the money that we're able to save the county based on the advice and counsel that we provide. Interestingly, that's not necessarily something that is tracked. And I do understand it might be something that's difficult to quantify, but it's something that we take stock of every day in terms of the reach of our advice and counsel and the impact of it. It also manifests itself in situations where we do have a controversy that requires resolution, where we're able to resolve matters early, which we think is in the best interest of the county. There are really two things that at least from Corp Counsel's perspective, we're going to highlight today. One is our continued commitment to developing our expertise in-house so that we're able to keep more work within the office as opposed to sending it to outside counsel. The second part would be our commitment to becoming more efficient in terms of the way that we practice law. So I'm gonna stop there and give our risk manager opportunity to maybe give some opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hello, good
afternoon.
Nice to see you. You know, Solon and I, Corporation Counsel and Risk Management, in this past year in particular, have really worked together much more closely, I think, perhaps in the past in the county, and even during my tenure, to sort of create a seamless relationship between what I consider to be Risk's role in trying to prevent and look forward around the county where there might be issues that we need to deal with, and working closely with my partners at Corp Counsel to make sure that if there are serious questions about the practices and procedures around the county, that I'm working with my partners at Corp Counsel to correct and advise those departments on those practices and procedures. And to me, that is a big part of what I do on a regular basis. The other, I guess the other component, which has really been kind of illustrated through some of our work with our KPIs, is the focus that we've had at Risk on safety, reducing work injuries on the job, as well as making sure that those who are injured on the job get to return to work as quickly as possible. And all of that does save the county money, and I'm pleased that we track that. That's something you can really quantify and track, and I've got a really good little team at Risk Management that helps make sure that we're staying on top of those. So happy to talk about any of those aspects of our work.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Aaron Thomas, and he's gonna walk you through our 2023 year in review.
Good afternoon. So as you can see on the slide overhead, one of the things that we've really leaned into this past year was, as Solon talked about, was integrating technology into the practice of law to make us more efficient, as well as being able to capture information, provide it to clients so that they can make better and best informed decisions. To that end, this past year, we implemented electronic reporting tools, whereby certain information is captured and shared with captured by our outside counsel. We put into place reporting requirements that they are to update our office on the developments in their cases, at least on a quarterly basis, and that satisfied not only requirements that we have for managing the cases in-house, but also reporting requirements by our excess outside insurers. That what we have seen over the past year is that has helped us in some cases where the client has to make decisions. They're in settlement negotiations or attending settlement conferences that may be ordered by the court, and being able to give them in real time, hey, how much have we spent to date on this litigation? What does it look like if we're at this point here? What does anticipated litigation costs look like from this point through say a summary judgment motion filing and a hearing, or through trial? And in those ways, we can give the client relevant information so that they can make decisions as to the best course as to whether to go forward with continued litigation, see it through trial, with the uncertainty of what that might look like versus resolving the case at that point. The other thing that we've really leaned into was developing in-house counsel and in-house talent, and evaluating cases as they come in to kind of say, hey, look, do we have not only the expertise, because we have a contingent of good lawyers, but do we have the capacity to take on and retain certain litigation in-house versus signing it to outside counsel? So we make those decisions every day, as cases come to us, make those decisions. And what we have seen over the past year is that we are retaining more cases in-house with an eye toward early resolution. Can we get a quick motion out, looking at the case, evaluating it? Is this case something that we can dispose of early on motion and resolve the case favorably in the county's favor? And so those are two things that we've really leaned into.
Could I stop you right there?
Sure.
For a second? Because what Aaron just outlined doesn't just relate to litigation. An example on the transactional side would be the closing on the Pontiac deal that the closing occurred yesterday. But from the county side, we documented the deal through the use of in-house expertise. Myself, Jody Hall, and Aaron Thomas worked to document a nearly $20 million deal. That's not something that went to outside counsel. Jody Hall was the tip of the spear on that, and that was something that easily could have cost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 just for the transaction had we gone to outside counsel. So, in terms of looking for those opportunities to keep matters in-house, it doesn't just relate to litigation. It relates to the transactional side where we have a number of talented attorneys internally where we're able to manage, not only matters that deal with real property, but on the policy counsel, labor and employment, We recently retained outside counsel to provide advice relative to immigration law. But those expertise, our internal attorneys will ultimately be the benefactors of that relationship. And will add knowledge around immigration law to their practice. So, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's a good point, because those types of processes and do lend themselves to the transactional side of the work as well. Obviously, before this body, you as commissioners maybe hear more about the litigation that comes before you, but obviously these processes do lend themselves to the transactional side of the work too. One thing that I will say about the two reporting process that we put into place, and that is some of our outside counsel, actually several of our outside counsel, commented to us that basically said, hey, look, we do this routinely and regularly for clients, for our insurance clients, where we do this insurance defense, and they regularly and routinely require this type of quarterly reporting. We're glad to see that Oakland County is putting this in place right now. So we've gotten good feedback from our outside counsel partners with respect to requiring this reporting, and so that we can manage those cases that we have outside. But we also require our attorneys, when we have in-house cases, to do the same thing, that they are looking at these cases, reporting these things to us as management on a quarterly basis, again, so that we can have those discussions with the client departments and talk about the best way forward on a particular case.
Another piece related to that is when we do have litigation that goes to outside counsel, we have now instituted a policy that requires them to give us a litigation plan. So a litigation plan is their first blush impression of the case for purposes of what we're here to talk about today, where they're handicapping the case in terms of cost of defense. And then that allows us, as we proceed through the matter, to track against that number. Any meaningful or significant developments in the case, they're required to update their litigation plan. These are all standard ways of operating in private practice. For whatever reason, they have not been implemented here within Corp Counsel, but because we're mindful of the limited resources that we have as a county, we want to make sure that we are being responsible fiduciaries of the resources that you all are providing to us.
And the importance of looking at a case early and giving us an idea of what it might cost to defend, what the liability is, and doing that in great detail is important for our insurers as well. So our self-insured retention for our auto, for example, is $500,000. As you can imagine, in a bad auto crash, you get to $500,000 very quickly. So, that analysis is critically important to know, do we need to put our insurers on notice? And so I very much applaud that step, because it allows us, as well as our insurance company, to understand that, that we are, the things insurance companies don't want are surprises, right? They don't want to find out a year down the road that, we might reach the $500,000 SIR limit, and now your money is on the hook, and then they have to play catch up. That's a very bad look for us. So that is a really, the tightening up the reporting and the initial analysis of the case is really critically important to the work that I do with our insurance companies. So it's a much welcomed development.
And just a couple of other, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this before we move off this, and I will say this because Dee had talked about the collaboration between Corporation Counsel and risk management. That was something when I first got here that Dee and I both worked on, and we said, hey, look, let's get a litigation plan in place, because I knew that her background was insurance defense. Let's get litigation planning in place. And so that's kind of how, again, how Corporation Counsel and risk management have worked collaboratively over the past year.
And just a couple other points before we move on. We've also developed a profile in some respects in terms of what we look for from outside counsel. There are the substantive areas that we generate work in, contracts, labor and employment and those other issues and areas that come up in the operations of county government. But we look for law firms, first of all, to have experience working with public entities. So they understand governmental immunity. You know, they understand how authority is obtained and how government speaks and how government acts. You know, because you all work for and around government, we take this for granted, but folks in the private sector don't understand why you just kind of can't go and do things. So sometimes if we were to have a law firm that hasn't worked with the city or hasn't worked with the county, we have to talk about the operation of government before we can talk about the substance. So we're not looking to engage in partnerships where there's a significant learning curve with an outside law firm, because ultimately you'll pay for that, right? You'll pay for them to learn how you do things before they can assist you. So that's a part of it. We tend to look for law firms, particularly in the litigation realm, that are aggressive and appreciate our philosophy about an aggressive motion practice early to try to, in a best case scenario, dispose of a case and at a minimum narrow the issues, right? So that we can make a determination at a certain point early on. Is this a case we think is gonna go to distance? Is this a case we think that we should settle because the cost for outside counsel will be equal to or less than the cost of the case continuing? Lastly, why are statistics important? We have entered into conversations with our clients about using data to make decisions, right? I use the sheriff's office as an example. The types of cases that they generate, the players involved, the employees involved, and looking to see if there are patterns, right? Are there certain employees that we're seeing the name pop up in a lot of incidents, in a lot of complaints? Are there certain types of claims that they're incurring? Excessive force, conditions of confinement, 1983 actions around alleged policies that run afoul of the Constitution. And what we found is that, you know, those seeds are starting to bear fruit in terms of, you know, asking for the data in situations where we are trying to actively settle cases, when we're able to show a client in real time, here's how much money we have invested in this case already, right? That, you know, that I don't want to suggest to you that how much we have spent on a case is the sole deciding factor, but you gotta keep that in mind, right? Sometimes you have to spend a certain amount of money because we want to prove a point. There's no free chili here, right? But that's not every instance. There are some instances where it just makes sense when you look at what you have invested, where it may go and what you can get from cutting it off at a certain point where it makes sense. You know, to Dee's point about when you trigger the insurance carrier's money. We had a catastrophic, it wasn't a catastrophic incident, but it was a significant incident where there was an individual who experienced a degloving of skin on his leg. This is a case that, had it gone to trial, I'm almost certain that it could have resulted in a 7-figure judgment against Oakland County. And when we talked to risk management about what we had already spent, the settlement that was on the table, we were able to get it done such that it did not trigger our SIR. You know, which would have put us in a place where now the carrier has a bigger seat at the table and we're now on their dime. Now, it was an instance where we had to let them know we're in your neighborhood, and it became necessary to keep them aware of where we were with the case, which was not necessarily very comfortable because they knew, like we did, this has 7-figure potential exposure. But we were able to work with them amicably and resolve it to the satisfaction, I think, of the sheriff's department. You know, anytime you're talking about something close to $500,000, that's real money. But it was a serious incident and it was a case that we have been working on for a while. So we've talked a lot already. We'll stop right there and maybe give you a chance to ask some questions based on what we have presented thus far. Questions?
Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Yes. I'll start with Commissioner Rahman,
Yeah, he was
followed
fast.
by Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Quick draw.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We certainly appreciate you and everything you're continuing to do to keep us safe from a county standpoint. I guess I have a few questions and they're sort of all interrelated. As a department, what do you feel your greatest need or ask is of us in the finance process? Or is there a need from the financial aspect? And the reason I load up this question is because we've heard from several other departments, also with attorneys in different capacities, which have expressed some very strong feelings and sentiments about unmet needs. So I guess I'm looking to you and Corp Counsel, risk management to sort of, without leading you down a path, kind of seeing whether the same opportunities, same challenges exist here. So I'll kind of leave it open-ended at that, and then I'll follow up with some additional thoughts.
You wanna start?
Sure, I think mine will be relatively quick. This wonderful committee, in the past several months, permitted risk management to do a bit of a reorganization. And that reorganization brought into alignment, I would say, our staff and personnel with our current and envisioned sort of scope of work that we do. And so at this juncture, risk management I don't have any great needs. I am working very hard to try and do things a bit smarter, and we have a great county resources and IT and all of those folks that help me think through the challenges that I have, and I'm very mindful of the budget. I think that the changes that we made to the personnel in my office, there was a slight budget increase, and so I greatly appreciate that. But I also believe that when you look at the qualitative advantages of those personnel, that it sort of more than pays for itself. So at this juncture, and also keeping in mind, risks budget is split between the building and liability fund and the fringe benefit fund. So it's not a general fund per se. And at this juncture, our big pieces are obviously costs of claims, workers' compensation claims, as well as our insurance premiums. Luckily, we seem to be on a relatively even keel on insurance premiums. Our workers' compensation numbers look better, and I hope those continue to improve. And then, our claims are our claims, and there's not much we can kind of do about that. So I appreciate the question, but I think that I am very happy and appreciative of the support of this committee.
So in response to your question, I touch on two areas. One is technology and the other is our people. That's all we have, right? If you looked at the assets that we have people, we have a copier machine, we have computers, we have an automated workflow system, we have an automated, which is part of the automated workflow, but we have a centralized point of contact where someone can raise their hand and say, hey, I need help. Right, and that's completely paperless. When that comes into our office, it's moved around without generating paper unless you choose. So, I would put down markers for a continued investment in technology, which allows us to be more efficient. We are a small office compared to, at least for me, other stops I've had along the way. In the city of Detroit, which has, when I was there, they had 100 employees just in the law department. Wayne County was similarly sized. Both Wayne County and the city of Detroit were behind the curve in terms of where this corporation counsel's office is in terms of technology. So that is something that I think gives us an advantage, because when we interact with outside counsel or when we interact with the larger world outside of this campus, we're able to interface with them in a way that they become accustomed to dealing with.
Sure.
It's not like, oh, well, we got to put that in the mail to you, or, we're trying to beef up our ability to send, larger electronic files, to send electronic files in a manner that is secured, right? So a commitment to continuing to invest in technology, personnel, investing in people. one of the things that we are committed to is constant, continuous, skill development, continuing education, going away to hear other experts speak and bring that back to us. We're
There's no deficit when it comes to staffing or compensation, right? Everybody wants to build, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
there's not a major hole in your department that, hey, look, we need this filled ASAP kind of situation.
No. Well,
And I'll leave it at that. I mean, don't feel free to go further. I was just curious
no.
because we've heard some code reds from other.
Make up
Yeah.
stuff now.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard some code reds from other departments, and that's not the case here, which is refreshing, and that's sort of where I was going with that piece.
So it's funny you asked though. If I had a wish list, I'd ask for more space. We have but here's why. We have an opportunity to hire another attorney, but I don't have anywhere to put them at.
Sure.
Right, so the middle ground was myself and my deputy and our administrative support supervisor talking about what we could add that we had the space for, which ultimately became a senior paralegal, who is someone who's going to function basically right under the lawyers, be able to handle a significant caseload and provide supervision to the two paralegals that we have. That'll increase our capacity, right? Because that senior attorney will basically be able to work up a draft of a motion, a draft of pleadings, and get that to an attorney where that attorney has to spend less time just on generating what may become whatever that action is, right? The way that we're able to get there is by actually sharpening our pencils on the current budget we have.
Sure.
Right? The first is said, yeah, you can have it, but how are you gonna pay for it? And, which I appreciated because the answer could have been just no.
Well, I was gonna ask you, kind of on a related note, your building space cost allocation. So this is on page 322 of the budget. Went up, it's not a huge amount, but I was just curious, because it went up from 112 to 126,000. So I presume that there's some extra space contemplated,
If it is,
or is that?
I don't know where it is.
The way, okay, so the building space allocation costs relate to a number of things. The cost of facilities maintaining the space, insurance costs. So it's,
So all
you
in
can
number.
keep, I would venture to say that every department probably had an increase that just related to what went into
Into it, okay. So it's
it,
nothing tangible.
and not necessarily an expansion, right? Yeah.
Commissioner Markham, I know you had the question about internal versus external risk management, so I'll defer that. The only other question I had is software support maintenance was showing a negative 28,200. Does that mean anything to anybody?
From the corp council budget, right?
Is that corp counsel? Is that what I was gonna say? I think-
Yes, 28, just.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kate. So that software support maintenance is actually our FOIA system. And what happened was that when we implemented it back in 2018, Corporation Counsel kept that billing in Corp Counsel's budget. And last year, we actually found out that through IT, it was supposed to be administered by IT. And IT was supposed to bill us quarterly for that software support maintenance. We worked out with IT and with fiscal to have those funds transferred. And unfortunately, I think that funds transfer didn't reflect on the budget report, but that's what it's allocated for. So really, it's just a transfer from our budget to IT's budget, but it's still for our system.
That's good. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions right now?
Yep, we got Commissioner, we have a whole bunch of them lined up.
Sure.
Commissioner Cochran, followed by Commissioner Smith-Charles.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Mine's quick.
Have you seen an uptick in lawsuits?
Yes.
What was
We've
your
seen-
question? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Have we seen an uptick in
Uptick.
lawsuits? We've seen an uptick in particular types of lawsuits, not the least of which would be wrongful conviction. Right, we have 4 active and we anticipate others. You wanna speak to some other maybe less obvious areas,
Yeah,
Aaron?
so the reverse convictions is probably the, as Solon mentioned, is probably the largest area where we've seen it. there's general, civil litigation surrounding, say, the Oakland, the sheriff's department.
Right.
Because so I've been in 3 counties now, worked in 3 counties previously, Macomb and Wayne, and that's always the biggest, area of litigation or source of litigation because of the amount of personnel interacting with people on the street, and obviously the operation of a jail. And there's that day in and day out, and something's gonna happen. So, but those would probably be the primary areas. But reverse conviction is probably the one that is where we've seen this. It's a newer type of case. We see a lot of action on that particular corner because you have a lot of plaintiffs' lawyers kind of jumping into that fray because of the allure of the amount of money that can generate.
I'd also mention HR, and I would mention HR in part because we had pivoted over the last, let's say, 2 years to becoming a more unionized operation, right? Where some bargaining units have been formed just in the 2 years that I've been here, and so with that comes an uptick in activity with HR and labor relations. Just because there's an uptick in cases generally shouldn't be interpreted as our people are engaging in conduct which is creating greater risk for Oakland County. One of the things you have to appreciate is that Michigan as a state has done a very effective job of limiting and capping tort claims, right? Slip and falls, open and obvious situations. So, plaintiffs' lawyers have to look somewhere to make money. And I think one of the places they're looking more often these days is to government, right? So what we're saying to our clients is as a result of that, we have to try to, as best we can, in whatever function or service you're providing to the community, let's try to avoid, minimize, or eliminate as best we can the risk that comes with us providing services to our constituents. It's a work in progress. As Aaron was explaining to you, just by the nature of discharging our police powers, there are things that come with that. For example, with Wayne County, their primary function, the sheriff, is as a jailer. They don't have a detective bureau, right? They don't actively investigate crimes. They don't have narcotics enforcement or they have a patrol that works on the water. I don't know if it's as robust as Oakland County's, right? We got a lot of lakes and water around here. So there are just certain things attendant to the type of law enforcement services that we provide, right? Because we contract with townships and villages in Oakland County that don't have their own police department, like a Pontiac, like an Independence Township. So there's risk that comes with that. The fact that we are in the process of implementing body cams, that's huge, right? Because it says to that citizen, it keeps them accountable, but it's also a reminder to our deputies that you got a camera on your body, right? And so, that we don't have to wonder what happened, let's watch the tape. Yeah. There's a little bit more activity, but there are also things that I think serve as a counter balance to that, where hopefully at the end of the day, we'll be better off than we were certain things not in place.
I hope so, and I don't think there's any bigger crime than sending someone to prison who is innocent. That's the saddest thing. What kind of lawsuits do you have because we're more unionized? Is it, like you said, slip and fall kind of thing?
No, you have grievances now. So here's our
Well, you have labor relations, right?
Here's our situation. Before we added more bargaining units, we have merit employees, right? That means that they have by definition and what is provided in the merit rules, there's a due process that's afforded to them under the merit rules. When you create a bargaining unit, they now have the benefit of the merit rules, and then they have a CBA. And the CBA typically has a grievance process.
Right.
And then we have PABs. So these have to be reconciled, right? The first question is, if you have a grievance, like, does it fall under the merit rules, or does it fall under the CBA, or does it fall under both? Right? With a more active risk manager, things are coming to her attention, right? where, hey, we need you to look into this. We think that's an unsafe condition. So that doesn't always result in litigation. We've had lawsuits that are not the county's, but because we are the funding unit to the 52nd District Court, we've had, what, 2, 3 employment lawsuits? Where it wasn't our employees, but because of this relationship we have with the 52nd, and because of the relationship that Corp Counsel has where we represent them with their consent, we are dealing with that. And what comes with that is, well, you gotta pay for that. We have to pay for those, those outside labor and employment lawyers. So in that respect, one of the things we've done is to engage in a two-way conversation. One with the court, and one with the administration in terms of what our responsibilities are as the funding unit and what the court's responsibilities or obligations are to us as their funding unit, right? People think they come out here, oh, the court's right there. The courts actually are part of state government, right? And we could talk for days about why that is and whether or not it's a good idea, but the fact of the matter is all of the resources that the courts need to operate, guess who pays for it? We do. Their technology, right? They depend on us for their legal services. Their technology, they use our HR department. They use our M&B, right? Their employees contribute into a retirement system that is operated by Oakland County. Because those are the things we provide to employees that are paid for by the county, but actually are court employees, right?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, next up is Commissioner Smith Charles, followed by Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It sounds like you answered the question I had earlier about sometimes we'll have finance meeting and we'll have a closed session towards the end. The attorneys are sitting out there. Are we paying for that or?
Yes.
Is it way, do you keep an eye on that? Because sometimes our finance conversations go on for hours.
It's fine.
Just, much like how we talked in Southfield Public Schools, schedule them first. If we have a closed session, put it in the early part so they can get out of here without charging us too much. Okay.
So we definitely watch the bottom line all the time.
Maybe we can have closed session first.
Invoices come in monthly. Those invoices are reviewed by myself or Aaron, actually. As a starting point, when firms are representing Oakland County, from a rate standpoint, we want a rate that is reflective of the fact that you're representing a public entity, the fact that you're being paid with taxpayer dollars, right? So if your normal rate is $380, yeah, we want like $240 or $200 even. So Aaron will tell you, I've had some situations that it was a real negotiation, right? And so we only bring outside counsel to those type of meetings when they absolutely have to be there. If it's something that we can handle, or if it's something where we can put them on the screen and they can do it from their office and you can go do some other things until we're up, yeah, your point is well taken. It's like having a taxi cab and you're in a building and the meter's running. Yeah, and we're familiar with all the jokes that come with, am I paying for this right now? Are you billing me for this right now?
Right.
The good thing about
Yeah,
Corp
you are.
Counsel is that it's already paid for,
Going to say hi.
which is why we try to lean more into in-house lawyers that are paid for. It's a number that's been budgeted, right? And it's a number that can be relied on. But with the volume and with the size of Corp Counsel, it's just not possible for us to handle everything that comes our way internally. It's not possible. Usually for us, when it's farmed out, it's not an expertise issue, it's a capacity issue.
Okay. And just noticing the clock, I feel like Maxine Waters, something about time, I forget what she said. But question is about self-insured, what does that mean in the context of the county? And
Good question.
throughout the entire categorical book, we're talking about recouping claims reserves. I'm not sure if you answered that already, but if you could help me understand that. So self-insured, how's that, and what does that mean in terms of a county? And recouping claims reserve.
That's a D. McBrone question.
Okay, so the county is not truly self-insured. And self-insured means essentially you have no insurance. And if a claim comes, it's on your dime, right? We have, I wanna say roughly 20 insurance policies that cover a variety of different things. We have an auto insurance policy, our deductible, when we say SIR, that's a deductible, right? Self-insured retention, it's $500,000.
Self-insured retention.
Yes, SIR equals deductible,
Oh, yeah,
like how
there we
we
go.
normally talk, I don't know why they change it when it's commercial, but
There we
they
go.
do.
It's the code.
So our auto deductible is $500,000 per incident. And so for the most part, unless it's pretty
Oh, yeah.
rough, unless it's a pretty bad accident, it comes directly out of the building and liability fund. There are other types of activities,
Cybersecurity.
including, yes, well, cybersecurity is a great, no, we are lucky to have cyber insurance. Our current self-insured retention is 500,000. It might go up, it's in the middle of renewal, so we'll see how that goes. But we renew each of these insurance policies every year, and each time the renewals come up, we have a whole other conversation about, does it make any sense to even buy this insurance? There are some that are a great deal. Our auto insurance is quite frankly a really good deal. Our net and SWAT deductible's $25,000, right, for net and SWAT. Those claims come along relatively infrequently, but when they do, they're often relatively large. So that's what self-insurance means. For the most part, most of our activities, for police activities, not net and SWAT, but other police activities, for HR activities, we do not have what's called primary insurance. So there is no SIR, right? But what we do have is an umbrella policy that goes over top of all of these insurances, but that SIR is $5 million. Okay, so most HR claims that come to us are probably not going to be more than $5 million, but if they were, it would trigger the excess insurance. And so hopefully that is a bit of a picture, okay.
And then just quickly, the recouping claims reserve.
So it might depend on the context of what you're exactly looking at. I mean, I'm not familiar with every single spreadsheet. There are ways in which so for example, there's an auto accident, it's 5 cars were involved, right? And so we pay out a certain amount of money, but then another party has to pay us. There's subrogation we do against other insurance companies, et cetera. So if there's a specific line in question, if it's a lot, I can sort of take a look and see exactly what that means, but that's sort of it, yes. We reserve amount of money for that claim, and then if we can recoup it from another party that might be partially responsible, then that's what we do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because it gets into how do we address the attendant risk that we face just by operating, right? Is it paid for out of the general checking account, or do we have the benefit of someone else providing protection to us because of a certain profile that we present? That's the umbrella policy, right? So were we able to convince a carrier to take on some of our risk, right? The way that we're able to do that is by having sound operating principles and best practices, by demonstrating to them the way that we counsel our employees so that they know their job and so that they know what type of behavior may trigger a risk to the county. Right, as I said before, obviously we have a lot of work to do in that respect, but Oakland County is very fortunate to have the resources to be effectively self-insured, right? The city of Detroit is self-insured. Wayne County is self-insured to a certain extent like we are, but we're all aware of how some of their financial situations have played out. Oakland County has been able to avoid that for all of its history.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Commissioner Long, followed by Commissioner Cavell.
Right, I think hers kind of led into it about your time. So out of the 22 positions Corporation Counsel has, how many are paralegal out of those?
We have 2 right now.
Is that enough?
This
is what keeps coming up, so what I'm thinking is.
It's sufficient, but with the addition of a third, right? So if you look at, let's say we have 6 or 7 attorneys that do litigation, and we have 3 paralegals, right? On the litigation side, you're able to almost have 1 paralegal for every 2 lawyers, right? But the paralegals also do some work on the transactional side, which is more tracking various drafts of documents, proofreading, research.
Well, I was thinking of the tapes too that you get, like you're saying, everything's filmed and this
Yes.
came up already on
Yes.
prosecutors
Yes.
reviewing
Yes.
deputy, or,
Yes.
the
Yes.
sheriff's tapes for
Yes.
cases.
Yes.
I hope a paralegal does that, and I hope we have enough, because I mean, cause it's a cheaper bill, and
So-
lack of a better word,
So there's the volume that comes in, right? And then there are the number of attorneys that those paralegals have to provide service to. We're just trying to expand the capabilities and lean more into the skill sets of our paralegals. Quite frankly, I think the way that we're stretching them now is from them admittedly a bit different than they've been used in the past, where we're asking them to truly be a paralegal, to draft this, right, to
Okay.
review this, right, to function. The difference between a paralegal and a lawyer, by and large, is a license to practice law or having gone to law school. But a good paralegal is highly effective and very helpful, right?
Right.
So we're transitioning in some respects the work that our paralegals do, but to answer your question, it is sufficient and it will get better with the onboarding of a senior paralegal.
That's what I was gonna ask, so you're
Yes.
having a new senior, so that will bring you to 3,
Yes,
but it's still not the ratio that private firms have, remember, what was it, 1-8? No, was it 1 to? 1-3, and and our department prosecutors want 1-8, yeah, 1-3, and so you're only right now 1-11. No, unless those 2 are included in there, 1-10, right? If I minus 2 paralegal,
so
There are
the
22
prosecutor's
positions.
the prosecutor's office is bigger than us,
okay,
right? For the size of our office and the volume that we have, could we use more paralegals? If we were gonna go beyond 3, I don't think it would be more than 4, just because of the number of attorneys we have.
Okay.
The thing that we grapple with every day is volume. We don't control what comes in. That's what I like to remind our clients of, like, okay, we didn't create this, right? It's like, this came here and here's where things stand. So our volume ebbs and flows, right? Put some stats up here to show you sort of how things stack up year over year. I think everything behind me says pretty much increase, right? I think that's predicated on the state of play in terms of the county and how we operate. I think part of that too is a growing confidence in Corporation Counsel, right? And an appreciation for the advice and the counsel, where we're not gonna try to figure that out here when we have this excellent resource over here. And so we welcome that, right? This is a positive development for us, because we look beyond the notion of kind of what Commissioner Hoffman asked, is there more coming to you? Yes, but not just because it's not like there's necessarily an increase in conduct that creates exposure for us, but as we counsel, I think our clients are appreciating the value and expertise that we bring to the table, so we're getting more. I think that's part of it as well.
then that senior paralegal position, that is already in the budget,
We sharpened our pencil, right?
okay,
We essentially
Just to
moved
make sure.
money from one area to another based on a very productive conversation with M&B.
okay, thank you.
Next up, we have Commissioner Cavell. And I do this to Charlie, but we're running late already, but that's okay. I'm gonna give you all the time you need to ask your questions. I just want the MIDC people to understand you're gonna be a few minutes late getting started here, if that's.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Pete. My apologies.
No, I'm gonna make the lawyer joke, he gets paid by word.
We didn't figure it.
Right.
My apologies.
The lawyer, yeah, I'm just teasing you,
So
someone has to
Commissioner
make a joke.
Cavell, you're up.
So I got a couple of budget questions and a couple like philosophical questions.
Oh, this is ones that are long,
So-
That's the good way to put it, so.
But okay, so I could
I
not
still
find.
get time to ask a question. too.
That's right, okay.
Yeah, so one.
So I couldn't find in the Corp Council budget, unless I'm not understanding it, how much outside counsel Yeah, what's that number?
So the way we pay for outside counsel is not a number that's reflected in corp counsel's budget. That would be a purpose of the buildings and liability fund, right? So I know enough about the BNL to be dangerous. But essentially, as I understand it, it is a fund that reflects an annual exercise where the county tries to handicap how much risk it thinks it will incur in a given year. Not just the risk, but the cost of addressing that risk and the cost of defense. So matters where it's a claim against or a pending claim or a possible claim, cost of defense or looking at or analyzing or thwarting that issue comes from the BNL. If there's a settlement, like when we come to claims, the settlement money is paid out of the Buildings and Liability Fund. I can generally tell you about the BNL that the amount of money allocated to it overall has been increasing every year. That's just a fact. I think the cost of outside counsel probably ebbs and flows in any given year, but I'm sure just with the reverse conviction cases that we're defending alone, the cost of outside counsel is probably increased, right? Dee works and has educated me at times on the operations of the BNL, so I know she has something she wants to add.
Right, I'm trying to remember so there was a funny thing with the BNL in terms of how we were tracking outside counsel and another line item, but why don't I, instead of me guessing, I will get it to you. And I think that, I guess I just wanna say, at any juncture in the year, if you have questions about the building liability fund, what we're paying for this or that, my door might just call, right? And we can make sure that you get those numbers in time. And again, this a little bit ties back to what you all have implemented in terms of the estimates for cost. It's that sort of having that seamless conversation is really, really important. So again, we try to look at what's on tap and what we're estimating for costs and then say, okay, let's put that in the B&L budget. It doesn't always work. But I want to say for the last B&L, the outside counsel was about 1.9 million. But I will check for you, okay?
And I would love just offline to learn more about the fund itself and, 22, 23, 24, where it's
Yep,
something like.
absolutely.
See how it's going up or down.
Yeah, that's sort of a sit down and look at those
Sure.
lovely numbers
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah, gotcha. And then, the self-insurance thing, that was interesting, cause it feels like, and I don't know how this stuff works, but it feels like we have catastrophic policies, right? That we're on the hook for the first 5 million and then
Yes, we
something
have,
that feels.
that would be, that's the term, the exact term is a
Sure.
catastrophic policy. Now, true catastrophic policies really, they typically have about $10 million
Sure.
SAR, right? But, so we have sort of a middle
But-
road one.
The question is, why, I know you do the math and every time it comes up, you said you reflect on it, but what is the cost differential between a 1 million and a 5 million?
The 5 million and the
Something.
10 million?
Yeah,
Let me just say that the tradition or the practice of having a relatively low SIR on the catastrophic was something that was implemented under the prior administration. It is my goal, it is the goal of our insurance broker who gives us this wonderful advice, who doesn't make money on commission, by the way. We pay him a set amount of money each year to give us great advice. He thinks that we should try and move it up, to more like 10 million, maybe even 15 million. But that's a little bit like turning a very big ship. We just have to make sure that we're not making decisions that are short-sighted, right? But it's also
Why is that his recommendation to us?
Pardon me?
Why is that his recommendation?
thank you.
Yeah, because it really is truly more of a self-insured approach. And that if we as a body recognize this is the cost of doing business, we put it in the budget, we recognize it, we do our best to estimate. And auditors like that, the financial world likes that, it's all certainty. And the truth is that, it's kind of we are paying more money for that additional 5 million, right? But we haven't quite gotten to the point where we wanna make it 10 million. And it's just literally a cost savings, right? It's, as we do things better, as we improve our policies, procedures, practices, we can have greater confidence that going to that 10 million really is worth the risk. But right now, it's,
Okay. And then kind of what you were mentioning a little bit, so when the sheriff came in, they told us that their training budget is $6 million and their total budget is 195 million. So that's 3% of their budget goes to training. I've always been of the mind that there is some sort of financial calculus to be made about trying to convince the sheriff to spend more on training because there's an insurance or risk liability. But it doesn't seem like that's true if every year their training budget stays at 3%. So, not to give you a loaded question, but like, where's that cost benefit come in? Cause like, you know what I mean? There's like 6 people that do training for the sheriff, he's got 1,500 employees. Doesn't that come up? Or am I just missing something?
no, I have, with respect to training,
You can't have a training facility if you only got 6 people to fill the
No,
building.
they probably do
with
more.
respect to, the sheriff's training, that is, law enforcement training is a specialty area. There are required trainings. I think the real question is, is the type of training we're doing and the follow-up to that training, is that going to reduce claims?
Okay.
Right? Some training is required, but that just because you're trained doesn't mean you're necessarily not behaving in a way that doesn't reduce claims, right? So I think that if that is a question to the sheriff in terms of increasing their training budget to offset or to minimize claims, you'd wanna make sure that whatever training they're getting is geared toward that. And I think law enforcement is particularly a tricky area when that comes to it.
Yeah, but to that point, relatedly, that's why, from our perspective, data is important.
Right.
So one of the things that was touched upon up here is the fact that we now meet with the sheriff, every
2 months.
every 2 months to talk about what's happening, types of cases, potential frequent flyers, status of active cases, because it would be foolish of us as court counsel not to realize where most of our litigation claims come from.
Yeah.
That's not an indictment on the sheriff, that's just
It is what it is.
right?
The type of activity that they're
So what we
engaged in, right?
said to Sheriff Bouchard is, hey, let's talk more frequently. I mean, obviously, we talk when we have to, but let's make it a point every other month to talk about these 4 things and anything else that comes up. And I think they appreciate that. I know we appreciate that. We're never gonna tell them to train less. Of course, we'd be happy with that. As a matter of fact, based on these stats, it looks like this is something you might wanna consider. That's where corp counsel is and Dee said, you know what? I need to be a part of that. Because on some of these cases that are coming in, here's what risk management needs for the sheriff to appreciate. That's a new development in terms of how we're working, right? We've been here with finance and we've heard what the chair said about, well, maybe when you come in there next time, I'm not gonna be warm and fuzzy to your helicopter parts. I was here for that. But I think the message was deliberate because the underlying issue was a case that I think that body felt this was avoidable. Right? So our conversation with the sheriff is how can we help you better do your job and minimize the risk you face while doing it?
Understood.
Yeah.
So, did you have something?
One more, Ms.
Yep, one last question. Thank you, Chair. So the philosophical one. So you talked about reverse convictions, right? And when we've been in closed sessions before, right, there's kind of it's come up where, right? Huh? In closed session before, it's come up.
That we don't wanna talk about it?
You can't talk about.
Why don't you let me finish my sentence and I'll get there. I got it.
It's a general
Thank
question.
you. Yeah, thank you, Bob. So, it's come up, right? Well, what is the benefit to the county versus the benefit to the county residents? And right, so you are here to defend the county government, which sometimes gets disentangled with the county residents. And so like wrongful conviction or reverse conviction as you call it, right? Is that like, and I guess not to ask you for strategy, but like in the theoretical sense, right? That's Oakland County messed up and maybe it was a generation ago before any of us were alive or something. But like, is that as an example something that you in risk or you in how do you thread that needle just of like someone might have been wronged by the county and so we should be nicer and more collaborative versus this is a plaintiff's attorney trying to get some money, wax pros for us, please.
So I would start by saying that when those complaints come in, those are allegations and they have to be proven.
Okay.
Our policy as a county is a firm but fair defense, right? If it's a meritorious claim, then then we gotta consider, we gotta be reflecting what we gotta consider. But if it's not, we're going to vigorously defend it, right? So when those claims come in, we immediately start looking at the merits of it. In the cases that we have that are active, the 4, none of them at this point is it a clear-cut situation of we have wrongdoing, right? There's one case in particular that I'll mention, which is the DeJesus case, where because of an aggressive posture we took, where we said in court, we think that when an individual accepts money from the Wrongful Compensation Imprisonment Act, WICA, that once they accept that money, it essentially is a bar to any other claims or recourse against Oakland County, right? So think about that for a minute. Who has the deepest pockets on a wrongful conviction claim? Oakland County, right? We got former Oakland County Court Judge Kumar to agree with us and say, yeah, I think that's what it means, right? So what that meant is the county in this instance, unless a successful appeal is raised, we're out of this case. This has nothing to do with the merits of the case, but it's a absolute defense to say, we had an agreement, we settled this, you're done, right? This leaves these individual plaintiffs, their only recourse is to go to federal court and go after those individual actors that they're saying wrong them, right? So there's another bite at the apple. We're not saying that you don't have a valid claim, but we're saying that Oakland County is not responsible for your claim. Maybe retired deputy such and such, or former this expert or that expert, but not Oakland County, right? So just because someone goes to court and files a complaint and says you did this and that, that's not the end of the story, right? Personally, if you're asking me what I think, I'm with Commissioner Hoffman. A person should not be wrongly incarcerated for something they didn't do. But when I come to work every day, my responsibility is to defend Oakland County, Michigan. So that's what we do, right? I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, I have Commissioner Wiper.
And just a brief follow-up on the 5 million versus 10 million.
Yes.
It came up in the transportation arena that
Yes.
you're requiring
Yes.
10 million on all our transportation vendors, or the authorities. And that's cost them they had to shop for new policies, and that's thousands per vehicle premium. So what, they asked me that, why wasn't 5 million enough and you guys required 10?
To be honest, I don't know why the agreement that they came, there was, as I understand it, there was an agreement among a number of different providers with the county. And that agreement said each of the providers would have 10 million in coverage. I don't know why who set those limits initially. I was not involved in that underlying agreement, but when someone wants an exception to an agreement, they come to Risk and say, can we make an exception? And the exception, it was essentially, how could we require this of other entities and not of every entity if they had already agreed to it? So I can get you further background on that, but and auto is a particularly difficult, auto is a particularly challenging area. So yeah, that's a little sort of
I would say
specific
though,
for
I would say in
us.
a general sense, The county is merely providing resources for somebody else to provide the service, right? So who should bear more of the risk for that? The person that's driving the van or that operate the van, the person that's responsible for the maintenance and upkeep and making sure that when you grab that rail to get on that bus, it's affixed? Or Oakland County, all we did is give WODA money to do what they're there to do, right? So I'm just saying in a general sense, when you allocate risk, why would Oakland County bear more of that risk for just funding something that they believe is important to the residents of Oakland County?
No, I understand.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions.
Sure.
One is about the wrongful conviction.
Yes, ma'am.
We're seeing more of this because of the change in the state law and
Yes.
I think everybody here agrees, we don't want people in prison that don't belong there that
Yes.
didn't do the crime. Do we have a pot of money that's set aside for this? Is it growing? How do we deal with,
To-
does it fit into our budget somewhere else or?
To my knowledge, I don't know that there's a fund established for wrongful conviction cases. I can tell you that it is an ongoing conversation between risk management, Corp Counsel, and Kyle Jen and his staff. We also haven't been hit with a judgment yet, so we haven't been forced to. The decision that I just referenced in the DeJesus case is huge. Because in the other 4 wrongful conviction cases, guess what? The plaintiff accepted WICA money. So we immediately went in those cases and said to those judges, hey, you heard about this? Right? And in a unrelated case to Oakland County, but filed against the city of Inkster, the federal judge in that case basically adopted the reasoning from Judge Kumar in our case. So what am I saying? Fingers crossed, but we may have undercut a growing cottage industry.
Okay.
Right?
Well, and I guess what I'm looking for is that the right people are talking about it.
We're talking about it.
You, Kyle.
Yes, yes.
To take, so
Yes.
that we don't get a big surprise.
It is the B and L,
Yeah,
right? So
okay.
that's where it would come from. And so we have lots of discussions all the time about, quote unquote, setting aside enough in the B and L to cover our potential contingent liabilities, but it's sort of an ongoing discussion.
But to be clear, it's not the BNL right now.
Right.
But
Right.
I think what Dee is saying, it would probably be the BNL,
Okay,
yes.
Right.
all right.
But I wanna speak for M&B though.
The last question I have really comes from the rest of the hearings that we've had over the past couple of weeks.
Yep.
And that is, there appears to be among the attorney fees that we pay a real disparity now. And it got really triggered by the establishment of the MIDC because those attorneys are getting paid $120 an hour, I think is the number. And that's all good, but probate was in here yesterday saying, we don't pay that. And therefore, we're either losing lawyers to any openings there might be there, or losing lawyers overall. And it's not just probate. So my question is, could we have a countywide look at what we are paying these attorneys that are dealing with the outside people, whether it's an indigent or a child that's in probate, and has to have counsel attended. Can we take a look at that overall so that we're treating people who are getting our, services equitably?
That's a conversation that we would be happy to participate in, but quite honestly, in deference to Pete, that's what he does. Because we have now established an office that provides legal defense to those that are saying they can't pay for it.
Right.
Right, that's a different consideration from Corp Counsel retaining outside counsel to handle very discrete and usually sort of unique or novel areas or just a volume of work for the county, right?
Right, yeah, I look at them
But yes.
differently. We're specifically talking about support of people who are in a court system and
No, I agree.
can't provide legal help for themselves because they can't afford it, so,
We would be happy to participate in that,
okay,
but I'm saying I would look to Pete to tell me how we could be helpful.
definitely.
Yeah, but we
Okay.
would definitely be willing to participate in that
I
conversation.
think the commission, at least the finance committee
That's
members
right.
saw that as an issue that's kind of percolated up, and we'd love to see you
Just
guys
went up.
kind of take a look at that.
And I guess lastly, Chair Markham, we're aware of it. We're
Okay,
aware of
good.
the conversation that's been going on.
Well, I'm being told by lots of folks that they're listening in to our budget reviews, so that's kind of fun. Okay, those were all my questions. Does anybody else have? Commissioner Hoffman?
I just have one, and you made me think of it when you asked your question about, does our reinsurer or insurance cover a wrongly convicted damages?
A lot of the claims that we're dealing with would be outside the coverage period for our current policies.
Okay.
Our current policies go back only about 8 years.
Yeah.
Our current, so if we had insurance, it would have been under that umbrella policy, that
That we
catastrophic
had at
policy.
that time.
And I think that was, I wanna say about 7 to 8 years ago was when we first purchased that policy. These claims, the injury occurred 10, 15 years ago,
Allegedly,
yes,
allegedly occurred.
So, excuse me, allegedly.
If it rules that way.
Yes, okay.
Doesn't the state set a limit of how much the person can receive per year, like $50,000?
That's under WICA.
What's under what?
That's under the wrongful imprisonment
Right,
compensation.
that's what I was.
So it's $50,000 a year for every year that you were imprisoned.
And so Corp Counsel successfully argued that because they had taken that money,
Right.
they had satisfied their recovery.
Signed away their rights
Correct.
or
Yep.
anything
There you
additional.
So I'm
Yep.
undoubtedly, not to speak for Corp Counsel, but we've discussed this, it will be on appeal likely.
Right.
But it's allowed us, it's bought us time, and it raises a very, I think, salient issue about this WICA and how does it work in the system more broadly.
Right. Thank
Right.
you very much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Rahman, one more time?
Sure.
We are over.
Yeah. Alright, I'll just put this out there. I'm
shacks when we're over.
Well, honestly, we only have 3 groups today,
Yeah, I know, I'm just
and
kidding.
knowing that, they and the MIDC group are kind of related, that's why I let this go.
fine, right?
Anyway,
We're here anyway.
It's good
today.
conversation.
last call,
right?
Commissioner.
Alright, thank you. So my question actually revolves around some things that have presented over the course of the last few days. Everything we talked about really is largely external, right? Risk management, things like that. Internally, for instance, probate brought to us, yesterday the issue that, their staff sometimes feels unsafe, right? And what is the value and risk assessment there to investing the funds to change the setup, put in barriers? I think a door they talked about, some things like that. Granted, there's an upfront capital improvement cost versus the potential risk of a disgruntled whoever coming in and attacking an employee and setting up a risk situation. They talked about furniture that's kind of MacGyvered together and, put on risers and, one step from falling on someone. Again, I know that's probably outside of the realm of maybe just an attorney. or maybe-
No, that's,
I
but
don't-
that's what I do.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
that's
risk
what risk is.
management.
I do a lot of internals, so I would welcome a phone call, a visit, whether it's building safety that I would interface with on some things, or facilities on some other things that relate to their furniture or others, but look, if someone sits on a chair and the chair collapses, and they have a broken tailbone, that's a problem for us, right?
So does this,
Them.
so are departments proactive in coming to you or vice versa? Are you proactive about going to them before it becomes a problem?
Well, we gotta be.
Some are.
Well, but the court, probate court, that's not county government, okay? So Dee, it wouldn't necessarily be advisable for Dee to just go over and say, I think you need to do this. Why? Because that's not county government. We provide services to them with their consent, right? What we do for them is we provide the money that they use to administer the court, right? So you all give them that money. You know how much money they have. So you know if certain type of claims come in, either they'll be able to pay for it out of what you gave them, or they gotta come back here. That's why we care, right? Because we know we're the backstop for you. So my thing to them would be, if you know there's a broken chair over there, we would encourage you to fix it. Why? Because if somebody hurts themselves, it's catastrophic, some kind of serious injury, if it's not in your budget, you're gonna have to come back and see us anyway. That's one reason among many that we care. We are the backstop. When they get sued, whether it be the circuit court, 52nd, or the probate court, because we're their funding unit, we get a seat at the table on how that matter gets resolved. Because we're essentially, think of us as their guarantor, right? If they don't have the money, then by law, because we're their funding unit, there you go.
And I'm fully with you. I guess my question is, where does that conversation start, right? I understand we're the finance committee, we're hearing
It
the budget.
oftentimes starts.
Yeah, they would come to us, come to us.
So where I focus my proactive work is not necessarily in office spaces. I do a lot of work with water resources, a lot of work with parks, a lot of work with facilities, because the work they do is inherently dangerous, right? It's trades type of work. So I focus a lot of my proactive compliance with regulations and training, et cetera, with those folks. Now, you know, if someone in an office setting comes to me and says, Dee, I think this isn't safe, I think that we could use this, I mean, then that's the start of the conversation, right? And then we figure out, okay, what's the department or the entity that's responsible for this? And it's a sort of a separate wrinkle because it's a court situation.
If
But
we're
let's
talking about the
Right,
court.
if we're talking about the courts. I had a situation, equalization, same thing. He came to me and said, can we get a barrier here? I connect them with building safety, right? And we have that conversation.
Or I'll do you one better. Let's leave the court out of it. Let's say the furniture's in the prosecutor's office, or the sheriff, or the clerk, or the treasurer. Those are county government, but they're constitutionally established offices. But if it happens there, then it impacts our bottom line because it's the county. But it's still the same answer, which is, how can we help you? Help me help you. If we're not aware of it, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think one thing I've heard out of this is we need to call probate and say, you need to talk to Dee.
Right.
And start
And we
that
just start.
conversation.
We just start.
And yesterday, we told Judge Hallmark, we said, talk to risk management,
Yes, we did.
and they said they were gonna do that.
Great, yeah, it's just, we just start the conversation.
Right,
You know,
that's good.
It's a one-stop shop, and then I figure it out, so.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation and for
Thank you
taking the
very much.
questions
Thank
and
you.
your patience. It's very interesting, and I think it's something many of us are learning about, is how the litigation goes. So, okay, thank you.
Pete's turning the barrel.
We'll move right up into the.
Bye, thank you.
Defense report. Bye, thanks for coming.
When I'm gonna.
Thank you, Aaron.
It's a 2-minute maybe.
You wanna take a 2-minute?
2-minute.
All right, we're
Please go
gonna
in the
take a
bathroom.
2-minute.
2-minute. Stretch, Sharon.
All right, I turned the clock back on.
Yeah, since we're behind, you only get 10 minutes.
We'll go quick.
All right. Okay, and we do have snacks.
Thanks.
So, healthy.
It takes a lot of brain work
Yeah.
to go through all
Good
of
to
these
feel your
hearings.
brain.
I don't
That's
know.
why kids need breakfast.
Yes,
That is true.
so, okay. Next group up for our presentation today is the Indigent Defense Services Group. You're new. You've only been a department for a year-ish.
My department for almost 2, and then Paulette Lofton, who's our chief public defender, has been, basically less than 6 months, so,
Okay, great.
yes.
So, welcome, and we're gonna have you make your presentation, and then, as you saw, we'll have lots of questions, so.
And I have watched the court presentations and the prosecutor, so I'm happy to take questions about the attorney fee issue. I've watched it all.
Thank you.
So, make sure I'm going the right way with this. I want to start out with this slide because I think it's so important to recognize that the provision of indigent defense services is a constitutional duty of government. And so it's a thing that we do, and we do it, the people who are practitioners in it do it because they think it's valuable and they want to help society. But regardless of those feelings, it is a constitutional duty. It's not something that we can avoid even if we wanted to. Everyone charged with a crime is entitled to a lawyer, and if they can't afford one, we have to provide that lawyer for them. We do that in our office for the Sixth Circuit Court, which means all felony cases in the county, because ultimately the felony cases are the responsibility of circuit. And then the 4 divisions of the 52nd District Court, we do that because the county is the funding unit for all of those courts. So we use a hybrid model to do this. We have an in-house public defender's office, which is run by Paulette. And we also have a roster of independent contractor attorneys. So the PD office is very new, just created. Paulette is in the midst of hiring. And right now, the split that we have is about a 90-10 split. So we have about 10% of our case load that we want to give to the PD office, and the remaining 90% goes to our roster attorneys. To give you an idea of, this is just a snippet of our caseload, because what you see on the screen here is just our felony case appointments. So this doesn't take into account our misdemeanor cases, and it doesn't take into account the arraignment attorney days that we staff. But you can see the fluctuations here over the last couple of years. This is just since my office has existed. But we in FY22 made approximately 4,400 felony case appointments for that year. So 4,400 cases that came to us that said, it's a felony and I need a lawyer. This year, we're on track to do about 4,800, 4,900. So you heard from the circuit court that caseloads are up. I can confirm that on our end. Caseloads are definitely up by about 5 to 10%. So we're seeing more cases charged, and really what it is, I think, is that we're coming off the COVID lull, and so we're really getting back to what historically had been the norm pre-COVID. You heard Judge Mattis, Chief Judge Mattis, talk a little bit about some delays in finding attorneys in some cases. What he's talking about there is cases that are already bound over in circuit court and an attorney has asked to withdraw from that case. So maybe there's a breakdown in the relationship between the attorney and the client. Maybe the attorney's not doing things the client wants done, or the client is extremely difficult, and the judge allows that attorney to withdraw. It used to be that judges could pull whoever was in the front row and say, okay, Ms. Coy's not your attorney anymore. Mr. Cavell, you're in the front row. You're the new attorney. Judges can't do that anymore. There's very good reasons why they can't do that, but it does create, in those cases, it can create a longer delay than they like in getting a new attorney appointed. Already in calendar year 22, we had 153 felony withdrawal cases. Already in calendar year 23, so that's 7 months, we've had 130 of those. So that basically means that I have a staff person who works on withdrawal cases
basically every business day, she has a withdrawal case that she has to search for a new attorney. And that's not always easy when they're first degree murder cases or other capital cases. We are funded by a mix of county general fund and state grant dollars. And so I think it's important to note that the general fund page that you have in your budget book is an incredibly small snippet of our budget. If you want a more complete picture, I would recommend also looking at pages 422 to 424 of the big book, because those are the mandated Indigent Defense Fund pages. And so that kind of gives you a picture of the fund, which is segregated, the Indigent Defense Fund and the general fund. We have to contribute each year a local share. And so when all of these reforms were made at the state level, one of the things that happened is each funding unit got its local share set by statute. So it was a calculation of the average that the county spent on indigent defense for the 3 fiscal years preceding the MIDC Act, which were 10, 11, and 12. So that calculation was made, every funding unit has that set, and it can only go up each year by 3% or CPI, whichever's less. So ours is about 1.8 million, as you can see. So we contribute that from the general fund every year, and we also, the general fund funds one of the staff people in my office who is considered supplanted under grant rules. Every year, as you know, because we were just here 3 weeks ago to accept our grant, we submit a compliance plan and cost analysis to the state. We tell them this is how much it's gonna cost over and above our local share to fund indigent defense. And then they either approve or disapprove our plan. In this case, they approved it. And they tell us, here's how much grant money we will give you. So this year, we're slated to receive, and MIDC approved our plan in June. You have already accepted the grant. And so the only thing that needs to happen now is that as of October 1st, once we hit the new fiscal year, we'll sign that grant contract, and then we'll get our first disbursement of this, the number you see on the screen, which is just over $21 million. And our grant really has two main components. It's the funding of our current employees, which is about $3.5 million. And then it's the funding for payment of our contracted attorneys. And this year, we have a new standard that we have to comply with, which is hourly payments across the board for adult criminal defense. And so that's quite honestly the brunt of our plan is really not personnel. It's about $18 million that's gonna go toward paying our independent contractor attorneys. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Paulette. We also have in our grant budget this year some funding, a few $100,000 for the construction of confidential meeting space in the 52-2 District Court in Clarkston. So previously the way that their lockup is situated, because the building is pretty small, they don't have a place for an attorney to meet with a client who is in custody without a deputy having to be standing right there. And so we're getting grant funding to reconfigure that space so that we can create that. Paulette's office, the public defender's office, is currently located in the what is known as the South Oakland building, although I know for many people, Troy is not south, but it is called the South Oakland office building. Her office is currently located there, so we're also getting some funding to create a small annex space in the north building, the Old Children's Village, just across the parking lot, so that she can have some dedicated space in Pontiac for when her attorneys are up here at Circuit Court. These are the employees funded by the grant, so there's 9 employees specifically in my office. It also funds 2 community corrections specialists who do bond recommendations every day for every arraignment that happens in the jail. It funds a corrections deputy position. That was done because we are now required to have attorneys at every arraignment, which means they have to talk to their clients prior to the arraignment. So it takes more deputy time to coordinate those communications within the jail. Whereas before, they were never entitled to an attorney, so they didn't have anyone to talk to before the arraignment, they were just put on the camera. It funds 8 public defender office attorney positions, including Paulette and her deputy. And then it also funds 4 support staff positions. This slide is just to kind of give you a sense of where we fall from an employee perspective in the public defender's office. You can see Oakland is on the bottom of the slide, but our minimum and maximum range are really some of the best in the state when it comes to what we are paying our employee public defenders. And we made a conscious effort to make sure that their classifications were consistent with the prosecutor. So if you're a senior assistant prosecutor or a senior assistant public defender, doesn't matter, you're getting paid the same amount. So we have pay parity both internally, and then we have what I would consider more than pay parity externally when we look at our neighboring counties. When it comes to hourly fees paid to our contract attorneys, they are changing significantly this year. The range is gonna be anywhere from $120 an hour for misdemeanor cases up to $192 an hour for capital felonies. So that's murder, first degree criminal sexual conduct, armed robbery, anything that you could get life in prison for. And again, we made a conscious effort to talk to our partners in Wayne and Macomb to make sure that these rates were gonna be consistent, because we don't want or need a system where attorneys are saying, well, Macomb pays more, so I'm gonna go to Macomb, or Wayne pays more, none of us want that. Because we all want this system to function. I think that, I'll save it because I know that we'll get a question on the attorney fees, so I won't comment anymore until question time. We also have a budget for experts and investigators. So this is something that really previously, before our office existed, before there was this streamlined process, every attorney had to go through whatever judge was assigned to their case. Maybe they had to file a written motion, wait a few weeks to get an expert or investigator appointed. It was kind of a cumbersome process. And we've broken down a lot of those barriers, and we have significant funding within our budget to pay for experts and investigators. And we also will have, Paulette's gonna be doing interviews in the next several weeks for an actual employee investigator within the public defender's office, which is gonna be great. So this gives you a sense of our expert and investigator requests that we've seen in fiscal year 23, which is the top bar. We've seen 66 requests for an expert already and committed $170,000. And that's compared to last year where we had 45 requests and spent $150,000. And you see a similar ratio for investigators. Requests are essentially doubled from what they were last year. So we're really getting these resources out the door. And this is something that we look at to say, not only are we providing valuable service to our attorneys, but are our attorneys providing valuable service to their clients? Because we know that people are asking for investigator and expert assistance in situations where maybe before they would have said, too cumbersome, or I don't have the time to do it, or it's not gonna get approved anyway, so why should I even ask?
Right.
This slide gives you what I envision as future staffing and future funding. And so we expect the Public Defender's Office to grow over the next several fiscal years. So the chart on your left, you can see right now with 12 positions in the office and about 10% of the caseload, the hope is over the next 5 years, we would grow the Public Defender's Office to where it could take 40% of the caseload. To do that, it's gonna take 34 positions. That's not all attorney positions. Some of that is paralegals and investigators and social workers. But so you can see as our public defender positions go up, the number of contract attorney positions needed will go down. This is not an apples to apples comparison because our contract attorneys are not all taking what I would consider to be a full caseload. So you can see right now it says, well, we need 46 contracted attorneys. That would mean like a full-time 40-hour-a-week person. We have way more than 46 contract attorneys. We've got like 150, but they're not all taking a consistent caseload. So that's why that number, it's not quite a fair comparison. But the chart on your right is what I would consider to be the budget projection. And so you can see as that budget need increases for public defender office personnel, you're gonna see corresponding the need for private attorneys to go down. And so there will come a point in time where those two lines actually probably reverse. These are some things we're looking at for the coming year. MIDC standards 6 and 7, we expect to be approved by Licensing and Regulatory Affairs this fall. Standard 6 will regulate the maximum number of cases that an attorney can take. So a lot of those staffing projections that I just showed are based on the standard 6 numbers to say, well, if an attorney can only take this many cases, here's what our total caseload is, so how many people do we need? And then standard 7 is going to bring us some increased supervision requirements. The standard that we set for attorneys and what level of cases they can take, I think actually is pretty stringent. But standard 7 is designed to be a statewide standard to say, okay, if you wanna take a murder case, you have to have gone to jury trial on X number of cases. We're pretty consistent already with standard 7. There are a few areas that we will need to change. But the point is to set a statewide standard for that. And it's also going to require increased oversight when it comes to actual court observation of attorneys. And then, as you've heard, the last bullet there is the possible integration of juvenile cases. And so there is a bill pending right now that would bring all juvenile delinquency cases under the auspices of the MIDC, which would eventually mean it wouldn't happen immediately, but once the standards were in place, you would see something very similar to what we have for adults, where all the appointments would have to become independent of the judiciary, the payments would be hourly, et cetera. So that's my last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sure Paulette is as well.
Alright, excuse me. So first up, I have Commissioner Cavell, followed by Commissioner Rahman, and then Commissioner Hoffman.
Well, so Pete, just as this,
First,
the
he's
juvenile
excited.
cases, we were talking to Children's Village folks. Would the delinquency cases also include abuse and neglect?
No.
So then.
No,
Who
we
figured
just-
that one out?
Well, and that's part of the concern that the circuit court expressed to you when they talked about their need. Because there will be that subset of cases and also probate, because no one's talking about any probate stuff coming into the MIDC. That they will have that unmet need, that they're still gonna be appointing attorneys. The courts will still have to do that.
Okay, got it. Can you help us understand, you mentioned the 52s, right, that you do stuff with the 52s?
Yep.
How does that, so how do you two work together and the 52s? What's the interplay there?
Well, so we are the what is called the appointing authority for every court that we fund. Since we fund the 52s, we have to appoint attorneys on all of their misdemeanor cases, the ones that stay there. We're actually, I can't tell you how excited I am to have Paulette and to have a public defender's office in this county. Because what it allows us to do, and I'm talking even over the last month, it allows us to go to some of those courts where we have had issues, maybe finding attorneys who are even willing to take cases there, maybe finding attorneys who are willing to make the arguments that they should be making when they go there, and say, okay, we have a dedicated staff who can take and staff an arraignment day in 52-3 in Rochester, staff an arraignment day in 52-4 in Troy, staff a public defender docket for a judge in 52-3, be assigned to that docket and continue on with all of those cases. And that's just a microcosm of what we're gonna be able to build as this office expands. So I don't know if that, I don't know that that totally answered your question, but the point is to say the public defender's office is a separate entity, but they get appointed by our office to handle wherever we need them to handle in the county. And Paulette and I are very collaborative in making sure that we're sending them to the places where we really need to send them and not wasting their time.
Cool. The with the 52s, is all of this also being copy pasted or replicated in like the 50th or the 43rd?
Yeah.
Is that not?
They're still under MIDC standards, so they're doing their own, but obviously they have local funding units, so it looks a bit different.
It would surprise me if any of our non-county district courts created their own public defender's office. Theoretically, they could, but because of the way that it's structured and the smaller case volume that they would have, it just probably wouldn't make sense for any of them to do that.
Okay.
So they have their own local funding units for the misdemeanors. So we are only covering the 52s, but say Pontiac or Waterford, they have their own list of attorneys that handle the misdemeanors there.
Okay. Is the list of attorneys that still is acceptable, like theoretically? Like it's obviously acceptable based on the standards, but like, is that the thing, you referred to like, well, yeah, you might not make a good argument if then you're not gonna get called up and then you can't pay your mortgage because you make too good of an argument in front of a judge that doesn't call you back.
So judges are not doing the appointment, each court has someone like Pete
Gotcha.
in that same position that is separate from the court that handles the appointments.
Okay, great, thank you. And then you mentioned these two community corrections people, and you mentioned they come to hearings and stuff, I mean, that includes bail?
Yeah, that's their only job.
So, I mean,
So
why is that important?
Yeah, well, so they what they do, and community corrections, I cannot say enough about Eric Schmidt. I know that you have all met him. He's amazing and an amazing partner in everything that we do. His community corrections specialists are in the jail every day, very early, meeting with everyone who's on the arraignment list for that day, getting their background, their social history, their criminal history, calling references, potentially if they have, and formulating a bail recommendation that they then give to the judge or the magistrate to say, here's our recommendation of how you should set bail. They're also giving that to the assigned attorney for that day, which is how we are able to fund some of them through the grant, because they coordinate with the daily arraignment attorney. The judge is not bound to follow their recommendation. Certainly, they make their own decisions. But the fact that they're conscientious about looking at how we use cash bail in our system, trying to eliminate using the use of cash bail and saying, okay, there are a certain subset of people who should not get out of jail. But unless we're dealing with that small subset of people, we really wanna make sure that we're not imposing cash conditions that are just gonna make them poorer, keep them locked up. Then they lose their job, then they lose their kids, then they lose their housing, getting in that cycle. So I can't say enough good things about that team.
Okay.
And they provide information to the defense attorneys, because very often you will have a conversation with someone that you were assigned to, and you'll say, what is your criminal history? Like, I don't have anything. And then you get the pretrial service and they have 5 felonies and 12 misdemeanors. So you are in a better position to argue for a bond when you actually have someone preparing a document and saying, this is what their record is like, this is what their home life is like. They say that they use these substances daily, so make sure you're pushing for some sort of rehab rather than just incarceration. So it's an invaluable report to the attorneys as well.
Cool. And just to that, I'm done with the questions, but I remember hearing recently that 40% of the people in Oakland County Jail are there pre-trial because of bail.
Correct.
So they did not make bail. And then there's like 1,100 people in Oakland County Jail. So it's over 400 people are there. So, okay, appreciate you.
All right, next up I have Commissioner Rahman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we go back to slide 14, please, for just a quick second?
Yes.
So I like-
Make sure I have what, is this the correct number?
Yep, that's what I'm looking
Okay,
at, correct. And I was fascinated by this slide actually. So if I'm looking at the numbers correctly here, we're talking about going from, I think it's doing the math correctly, 58 total positions currently to about 63 over the course of X number of years, 5 years or whatever that is. So we're increasing by 5 total positions. But if I'm adding the numbers on the other end, we're actually coming down as far as cost 10 to 15%.
So I would say yes, and the reason why is because the line that you see, the blue line coming down,
Right.
those are our contracted attorney
Correct.
positions, which is, like I said, is kind of a false number because it's based on,
Understood,
Yeah.
understood. But I'm saying even if you smash them all together
yes,
into 46 positions.
yes,
Overall, with the PD number of positions coming up and that coming down,
yes, you're gonna save money,
Overall.
absolutely.
we're increasing our staff in 5 years and we're saving money.
I'll
So it's a
give you-
win-win situation, no matter how you look at it.
Absolutely. A perfect example is the arraignment days that I talked about where we assigned Paulette, a member of Paulette's staff. I'm paying $720 to a contract attorney to sit in a district court all day.
Right.
And it's an important job, but they're just sitting there doing arraignments all day and I'm paying them $720.
Right.
Versus Paulette's assistant public defender who's getting a salary and can also do her other work if she has a downtime. So absolutely, you hit the nail right on that.
So first up, my comment is that's phenomenal. I think this is the first department that's come to us with awesome news from a
Staff
budgetary
increase.
standpoint.
Yeah, and
It's not a staffing crisis or a compensation crisis. So thank you for that. This makes me
Or
super
furniture
excited.
crisis.
Or a furniture crisis, yep. So I appreciate all of that. So I guess my question to you is, being that we're here on the finance committee for budget hearings, what is your budget need for us? I mean, what are you looking for? What are we missing? What do we need to do?
Well, I think we're so unique because of the structure of the grant funding. And so my short answer is, quite frankly, nothing. I mean, we bring to you what we need with our grant acceptance. Our plan is to grow this office and we're gonna do that the same way each year, go through the grant cycle and make sure that we have the revenue coming in from the state. So in short, we're good. I mean, there are things that we will need in the future, but we have a mechanism to do that. The space we're gonna have to figure out, because as this office grows, we gotta know where the people are gonna go. But I think everyone has those challenges, right?
Well, your challenges are good ones, so I like this.
We
So,
got
yep, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Commissioner Hoffman,
yeah,
you're up.
we'll have plenty of space.
One question, all cases are not equal. Why would they limit the amount of cases an attorney could handle?
It's a great question because you have actually hit on a major flaw of Standard 6, in my opinion, which is that it's based on 150 felonies or 400 misdemeanors or, a prorated calculation. Well, a murder case is nowhere near a retail fraud first degree and they're counted the same for the standard. There are talks about tweaking the standard a little bit, and this would be at the state level, to put more weight on certain cases and to do exactly what you're saying, to say, no, we're not just gonna say 150 felonies, we're gonna say it depends on what kind of case you're talking about. Compliance with Standard 6 as it is written is going to be a very unique challenge that is gonna be presented statewide for exactly that reason. So my hope is that they will tweak it a little bit, but it remains to be seen if the MIDC will actually do that.
This is like the state micromanaging your
Yes.
department. And I think they do that in a lot of places.
Yes. I think though that it does sort of highlight the attorney fee question that has been raised by so many people. We are now in this situation because the state came in and said indigent defense needs to improve. And the first step in improving it is to do it at the adult level, because there are many more repercussions with adult criminal behavior than with other things. And so we've gotten to a point where these standards have happened, we've made improvements by leaps and bounds, and now everyone else has said, well, wait a minute. But historically, as Judge Langton told you yesterday, some of this has just been a lack of inertia on the part of the system to say, we really should be raising these rates year over year, and we shouldn't have left them stagnant, and we shouldn't have not come to you and asked you for raises in the past. Oh, and now that the MIDC is doing all this, now we need raises, and they're not wrong. But if the MIDC hadn't come in and raised these rates, we don't know where we would be. We don't know if anyone would have ever asked for raises, because the reality is that the attorneys who do this aren't doing it for the money.
Right.
And so it's very easy to keep their pay stagnant because they're doing it because they believe in defending constitutional rights in very difficult circumstances. And so they will do this work, they're not gonna do it for nothing. They will do this work for pennies on the dollar. They will. And that's how we've gotten away with it for so many years.
But I would say we should be compensating people fairly.
Absolutely.
That was not necessarily the right way to be
Absolutely.
living. Same with, free labor and animal control, right? I mean, there are things we've done for decades that the right thing to do for people and the people doing the jobs is to pay them what they're worth. And recognizing that people who do this public defender work and so on, they do it because their heart is in it. I don't think that should be a penalty. Right? I mean, yeah, maybe they'll take less pay, but let's not make them eat ramen 6 nights a week, right? So, yeah, good question, Commissioner. So on this subject of lawyer pay across the county, and especially the one that struck me was probate, where they were talking about children who are there, elderly who are there and can't defend themselves, and mentally ill who can't. And so these lawyers get assigned, again, they're lawyers who care and who wanna do this kind of work, but they're not making anywhere near now what some of the other attorneys are. And probate said we're actually losing people, either to other departments or jumping out of the county altogether to a different place. So do you have some ideas of where we should go, or how to assemble the group to really address this? Cause I think it's real. Do you all agree that, Commission, that this is something we ought to be looking at?
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
So they talked about the state statute, maybe the delinquency might come under you.
Yeah.
But then what Gwen's talking about, so then if that happens, that's good.
Right.
But then there's the abuse and neglect attorneys, that's where the worry would be. So is that statute really happening?
Guardianships, all that stuff.
I think that at its base, this is an issue that is going to be about more than just money, because the money will only go so far to attracting the talent. And so I think Ed Hutton talked about building a pipeline. One of the things that we're actually doing in Detroit District Court as sort of a pilot project is using the U of D Law School a clinic program where the law students, under the supervision of a professor, are actually coming in, providing legal services to some of our indigent clients. So that creates a pipeline for students who, when they get out of school, say, oh my God, I love indigent defense, I wanna do that. And I think that the same thing needs to probably happen in juvenile, the same thing needs to happen in probate. On the pay issue, Commissioner, I think one of the most important things would be to get some sort of comprehensive survey so that we knew, okay, what's being paid in Macomb for these cases, what's being paid in Wayne, what's being paid in these other big counties. We can easily see just right in front of our faces that the number is less than the MIDC rate. But what we don't know is how it compares to our neighbors. And we don't have a full analysis to say, let's look at the case complexities, because even within our rates, right, we have staggered rates. We're not paying you the same to represent someone on a drunk driving as we are to represent someone on a first degree murder. So there's some staggering that you would wanna, in my opinion, that you would wanna do to look at case complexities within those systems. So I would say participants, obviously from the courts. I would be happy to participate in it. I'm sure Paulette would too. And stakeholders from the private bar to say, again, in my opinion, more important than the pay is the pipeline. Because what I don't want and what I'm hoping we won't see from Standard 8 is a bunch of lawyers who say, oh wow, they used to pay real bad, now they pay great, I wanna go do criminal law. No, I don't need you. I need you if you're gonna be passionate about indigent defense, not because you just wanna come make a quick buck. So we gotta be careful there too.
Okay, I'm assuming our analysts are taking some notes, so after we're through all this and through the budget process, this is really something that needs to be discussed and dealt with over the next few months. But there's a solution in there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Kind of how I look at it. And I guess that is my last question or comment. Charlie, you're back on the hook.
You were all talking, and so it got me thinking. One, though, what you said about the pipeline, thanks to your question. I mean, we did that with the childcare, people needing to become certified childcare CDAs, Child Development Associate, because you have to do that to be able to, because we were gonna lose federal money for Head Start, because we didn't have enough childcare providers. So there is precedent there, I guess. Hanging out too many lawyers. We've done it before. So one, pipelining stuff. Thanks for giving us an answer, because it's a big problem when we're like, oh God, I don't even know the difference between district and circuit court. How am I gonna be part of the solution, But the question I had that came up is there a universe or a world or a future where possibly your offices can be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I'm glad you asked that, because I
Yeah.
totally meant to say that to Commissioner Markham.
Yeah.
That's another question. If it were some of these areas that weren't MIDC funded, obviously the county would have to fund it.
Sure.
But you could look into the feasibility of saying, we're gonna have actual employees, because it may be cheaper
Yeah.
in the long run.
When the economy of scale and the fact that all
Maybe
y'all are
cheaper to
there.
have employees, maybe they're supervised by Paulette, maybe by someone else, who are assigned to as probate defenders or probate counsel, right? Definitely something to look at.
Cool.
Excellent. All right, well, I think this has been a very healthy discussion and really excited to hear the progress that you've made since this got set up in the past couple of years. And it's definitely moving, in my view, in the right direction as far as social justice and treating people with respect and making sure the people that end up in our jail are the people that need to be there and so on. So, yeah, okay, so I
Thank you so
think that's
much.
it for the
Thank you.
Indigent Defense Department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Glad you listened in on the
And thanks for
hearings.
listening in to the other groups. I'm so
Absolutely.
impressed by the various folks like you that have had this in their earphones while we've been talking to other groups. It's really important.
You know, it's very informative when you work in county government, and I think everyone should listen in, but
I honestly think that's why some of us are on finance, because we get to find out everything.
That's right.
So, thank you. Mr. Ward,
Aha.
we're gonna take another 2-minute break before we get you
3:25, but
started.
he's not, he's 2:40, so we are late. I keep
We
looking
are
at
late.
that.
We made up 5 minutes
I
on the
know, I
last
keep
group.
looking at that open spot though, so I was like, he's
This
really
is the
early,
last
but-
one, isn't
Yeah,
This is our last.
2:40 he was,
So
yeah.
we're gonna take a 2-minute break.
Trick or treating, right?
In the office there.
Grazing.
Yeah.
Through the office.
I like that.
Candy jars.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have before us our favorite
Esteemed
ex-department head.
Our esteemed parks. Everyone's gonna be jealous.
We love
We
Pat.
saved the best for last. We saved the best for
We
last.
did.
Oh,
And
wow.
you got some of your
Yeah.
allies here.
I know.
Ready to
Now you got
support
it.
you,
Said that every day, don't feel that.
so.
I heard her say that to Pete Mena, yeah. Ready for us?
Yes, we are, welcome.
Okay. All right, we have, you know, you had to have one last PowerPoint out of this process. We've got one for you here. And if, I don't know if it's okay, if you just want to interrupt with questions along the way, it'd be all right with us. Whatever you like, Madam Chair. So, with that.
Everybody but Charlie.
Oh, man.
Just a placeholder.
You're a good sport, Charlie, I'm gonna give that to you.
Oh, thanks. You hear what I say behind your back,
Try something real quick.
Post those nerds that loud?
I feel like Charlie.
Okay, try again for me.
Yeah, sure, it is like
Good.
You're a hot cruncher.
All right, thanks, Erin.
Oh.
Okay, it's always good to just do a quick reminder of who we are and what we do. Say Oakland County Parks, we have a pretty large organization, 14 county parks, indoor golf courses, 80 miles of trails, 7,000 acres and growing, which includes 5 golf courses, 2 water parks, 2 campgrounds, an ORV park, 3 dog parks, 2 nature centers, fairgrounds and a farmer's market. So it's a wide variety and there's really no day that's like the last in this job, I have to say. I've never thought I would own a goat barn, a water park, historic buildings and banquet facilities or be in charge of them. And it's a widely diverse, just in terms of geographic area and the distances we have in this county. If you were to go from Addison Oaks to Lion Oaks, it's an hour and 15-minute drive. You could drive to Lansing faster from here.
That is true.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
And we, at any given day, we just have multiple things going on, great programs, special events, mobile recreation visits, activities at all of our facilities. So it's a great organization. And no offense to the board, best job I ever had. You were close second. And so just in terms of our recreation programming, I hope you are all familiar with our mobile recreation units and they all support your communities. Any given year, we have anywhere from 600 to 800 unique events that they support with deployments of our mobile recreation equipment. Stages, climbing towers, inflatables, that type of thing. And a lot of support for local communities through our RAP program. And then we have, a variety of other services and focus areas from the special events we hold, like the Marshmallow Drop and the Fire and Ice event. Melissa's team that takes the lead on planning and capital grant programs. And they've just had some great successes with some of the ARPA money getting rolled out in Hazel Park and Royal Oak Township and the support they provided to them, which they ordinarily would not have been able to access money like that and get money out in creating new playgrounds and better spaces for people to enjoy. And I think you all had a chance to see Carol Egbo last year, our historian. I think she shared with the commission.
Great job.
And she's a fantastic asset for us. And these are my bosses, and 2 of which are here. So, and not just because you're here, I have to say thank you to the commission for giving us such a great commission to work for. They're incredibly supportive, dedicated, passionate, and we couldn't ask for a better group of people to work for and work with. So, and it's a great diverse group of people, and pushing us in a new direction, which is very positive.
Didn't get those new pictures added, huh?
I did not.
My hair's thicker there though, before cancer,
boy.
that picture's old.
Always the details that trip me up. And, you know, we have this slogan that we've long used, great parks for great people, but really the reality that I've learned in this job is it takes a lot of great people to make great parks possible. And we are just very fortunate to have some tremendous folks that are, you know, dedicated. I call them, they're a bunch of MacGyvers, really. They find ways to get things done, stretch the resources as far as possible. Have struggled through periods of time when parks was really underfunded. You know, having to come in during the pandemic and work through that period of time, maintain the parks. We have some of the struggles, like I know you all have talked with animal control about the trustees. We lost the trustees too. They were providing grounds maintenance and assistance with maintaining our facilities as well. So we've had to fill in those gaps post-COVID. 626 potential seasonal staff positions, and that in terms of how many we actually fill kind of varies depending on our success rate of hiring. We've had quite a, you know, a nice bounce back in the last year. Been able to restore a lot of services that were pulled back during, you know, the height of the pandemic and the worst stages of that labor market shortage. And that's been in many ways thanks to some compensation increases that helped us be more competitive. The incentives and bonuses that we've been able to offer to attract seasonal staff. And, you know, some support, I want to give some kudos to the Human Resource Department and Sunil, the director. You know, we struggle a bit because we are so different than the rest of the county government. We're really more akin to a service industry type of employer with, you know, large turnover and large volume of hiring, a lot of high school and college students, and then people on the other end of the scale too, so older folks that are, you know, many of which work at our golf courses. And so our county HR process have been a little bit difficult for us to navigate and to, you know, bring people through the hiring process, onboarding process in a timely fashion. So we have lost people sort of to attrition. As that time period takes so much longer than the reality of the modern world of, you know, nowadays you can get on an app and decide whether you want to work today or not. And so a 6-week period of time from application to employment with a lot of hoops in between, it's not, it puts us in a competitive disadvantage in terms of labor market. So HR has been really helpful in starting to address those things and work through as many of those pain points as we possibly can. You know, it's always going to be an issue because we are so very different than the rest of the county government. So just to highlight the points I want to cover today, our Parks Commission have adopted 4 core values that inform all the decisions we make and the priorities we make and the how we use our budgeted funds: diversity, equity, inclusion, health and wellness, natural resources stewardship, environmental sustainability, organizational excellence, and fiscal responsibility. And we'll go over some of our urban parkland expansions that have been possible with the ARPA funding, the spending that we're doing to address long delayed maintenance and facility improvements, the staffing issues and the impact on our salary costs and budget, and just a quick overview of our capital grants and stewardship programs. I'm going to hand it over to Jim.
Great, thank you, Chris.
This is one of our great examples of excellent park staff. Jim started as a high schooler and has worked at just about every single job at Oakland County Parks. He knows it backwards and forwards, and now he is part of our upper management team.
I appreciate that, Chris, and thanks for believing in me. I definitely love my job, and it's been a great job over the many years that I've been here, which is close to 40 years, so it's been incredible. And I'm just gonna give you a couple of highlights of some of our diversity, equity, inclusion, the program that we did. We actually did a pilot program last year. We worked with the city of Pontiac and we put 40 kids through the program and we were able to do a celebration at the end. Well, this year we really stepped up our game and we provided lessons for 135 kids. So we're super excited, super proud of the kids that, you know, came and there were some days that, you know, they were very hesitant to get in the water, but you could see their confidence build each day as they went through that program. And it was a 4-day program, actually 8 days, 4 days each week. And it was amazing, just even our staff, and we got a lot of great thank yous, and at the end of the time, they would bring their families back and go swimming with them at the water parks. It was just a really a great program, and I'm glad we were able to do that. Another program that I think started about 10 years ago, this is a highlight for health and wellness, is our Riverwalk. It started about 10 years ago, and each year has really picked up. We end up with waiting lists for this program, and people really enjoy it. It's ages 15 and over, so you'll see a lot of older kids and their parents and their families to come out and do this. Just a great program. We usually do it after the water park closes, so it's usually about an hour long, and it runs 4 days a week in the summer. So we just wrapped it up, I think, yesterday. I think it was 2 days ago, we received an award from the 2023 Planet Michigan Green Community Landscape Beautification Award. So that's our stewardship and sustainability. I don't know if you've been to Waterford Oaks, but the native plants that they put out in our landscape are just incredible. You can really see the colors right now. Lots of different pollinators. It's just amazing that we're able to do that and really reduce our staff costs in managing, and we're not always out there fertilizing, and it's just a great thing that we're able to do at the park.
Isn't it amazing that we didn't think of this earlier? I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a cost savings, and it's so beautiful. And for years, we've just been out there trying to groom everything and take it apart, and when we let it get back like this, it's so much better and more cost effective, and
I agree, and it does a lot for the environment. There's just so much you could just go on.
I'm just really thrilled with the success you're having.
Especially when it's all growing in like it is right now. I'm really proud of one of our staff, our recreation supervisor, Sandy Dory. She was able to start a program that actually started during COVID, and it's called Disability Dirt Day. So we're able to take people with disabilities out into the ORV park, and we've got a lot of people that support us, that they come out and get involved. Now we did it once the first year that we did it, and now we're doing it up to 4 times a year. And we've got great turnouts. We got another one coming up, I think, in 2 weeks. So we're looking forward to it. But Sandy Dory was going to receive an achievement award, we're super proud of her for that too. So.
All right, thanks. Great job. Okay, back to the boring budget stuff. So just a quick snapshot of our revenues. We are primarily supported by a voter-approved property tax millage, 67% of our total budget, and about 32% are user fees, primarily golf, campgrounds, water parks, and vehicle permits. And so just in terms of expenditures, big picture wise, not surprisingly, salaries is a pretty large expense, salaries and fringe benefits. And our operating expenses to maintain our facilities and keep the lights on, 38% of our budget. And we have a little bit of a unique situation there because we are fully self-sustaining. We need to plan for a surplus every year so we can put money back into the piggy bank to pay for our capital projects. So we have a $1.9 million budgeted surplus this year. We also have this unique situation because we're a proprietary fund that we have to budget for depreciation, which is not a cash expense. It is basically it shows in the budget, but then at the end of the year, it gets wiped out. So it somewhat inflates our budget picture artificially as a result of that. And we've been working with Plant Moran and management and budget, hoping to get at some point to be redesignated as a special revenue fund so we wouldn't have that issue. And especially as we're heading into these new ARPA expansion projects, we're gonna have a lot more capital on our books. So that number is just gonna inflate even more. And as we catch up to all these deferred investments that have been built up over the years, that's inflating that number. So it makes it harder and harder to reach a balanced budget for really nothing but an accounting purpose. So we may be back asking for help with that. I wanted to give you a little bit of a picture of our long-term financials, especially heading into the approval of the millage. Just really, this paints a picture of how very important that increase was to the future and the viability and stability of Oakland County Parks. If you look at FY 14 through 19, every year was an operating deficit in order to keep, our budget afloat. And at the same time, our savings account was going down. So as anybody knows that's, funding their checking account out of their savings account and delaying maintenance on their house or their facilities, it catches up to you and you get into this fiscal downward spiral. And as we were disinvesting in some of our facilities, we were losing revenue even more, so it was accelerating. So this has been an enormous benefit to us, and it's allowed us to start to catch back up again. It isn't a panacea, it isn't a solution to all the problems, but it has provided much needed funding for us to start to catch up to, long-term underfunding. And just a reminder of that millage, so of course, as I said, we reversed the long-term trend of deficits and budget reductions and curation of our assets. And as a result, we have tripled our annual spending on capital improvements, equipment, and natural resources management as well. As been a new priority that we've put quite a lot of resources into. We have dedicated so far, since the millage has passed, $1.8 million to our local park and trail improvement grants, and Melissa will go over those real quick. $400,000 into community natural resources stewardship projects, a lot of invasive species control and restoration of the natural environment. We've increased our spending on mobile recreation and special events. And during the first few years of the decade, we were able to build up $10 million in our net position, which is essentially our fund balance, of which we are taking about half to fulfill our obligation with the ARPA program that you all approved to provide matching funds. And this just shows a picture in terms of how much our capital spending has gone up. And in FY 18, it was $2.5 million. And our proposed budget is $10 million. Now that's somewhat artificially inflated due to the ARPA program, but generally running about $5-6 million annually, putting money from that millage back into our facilities. And this has been a historic, wonderful thing, this ARPA Healthy Communities Plan you approved. 2007, the Oakland County Board agreed to accept Catalpa Oaks as really our first urban park in our park system. And in that resolution I was looking at, committed to a new urban park initiative. That kind of paused and stopped right there. And now we're beginning to really fulfill that commitment with these facilities that are coming online through the partnerships that we have reached. And your approval of our agreements with Oak Park and Pontiac, and we hope to get Southfield done pretty quick here, and then start focusing and getting on the job done. We, at Pontiac Oaks, the future Pontiac Oaks, which is now Hawthorne Park, right up the road here, that agreement was approved in June, and within 2 weeks, Jim and the staff were there cleaning up the park, and you can really start to see the impact.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. And by the end of the fall, we should have the long shuttered bathrooms reopened, a badly deteriorated fishing pier replaced. Early spring, we'll have some new playground equipment out there, and hopefully, late fall next year, we'll be celebrating fully rededication of the park. So it is wonderful to see how these funds are being used to really benefit people in a really visible, tangible way.
Yeah, these are facilities that for so long have just declined, right? And they got overgrown, and Hawthorne Park, I've heard some not really great things about dumping that's been there for years. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm really grateful to be part of all of this, that the money's available, that we get to help decide how it's gonna help, and that we're actually putting money into communities and parks and other features that have needed it for so long, and everybody was like, well, how are we ever gonna be able to afford that? To have this money come to us and everybody be real smart about it right away, this is our priorities, here, we all have these lists, if we ever had any money, here are the things we wanna do. This is my little soapbox, I'm just really grateful to be able to be part of that, so.
Well, we thank you for your support. I believe what the investment of the ARPA money is what made this all come together. And we've got some, great partnerships with these local governments as well. What we're doing is a little outside the box in terms of taking over the management of local parks. And so we're navigating that as best we can. We have a bunch of public info forums. If you're interested next week at the park, we've got a couple of family fun free events too, to start to gather up public engagement and feedback on what they'd like to see at the park in the future. So lots of great stuff happening there. Number one expense in our operating budget, salaries, as I mentioned. And we have had some increases in terms of salaries. I think you probably have heard that from all of the departments that have been before you. Just the general salary increases that have been approved over the last several years are accumulating. But we've also had to create some incentive programs that have come with a cost to be able to restore services and attract seasonal staff. And frankly, we had some chronically underfunded, underwaged, compensated jobs, especially in our frontline type jobs, our skilled laborers and the folks that keep our park operations going, and didn't have the in-house staff to do natural resources management like we're able to do now. So some of the millage money is being put to use with human capital that is allowing us to do much more and do it better. But it's always something we're mindful of not allowing us to get ahead of ourselves, because we can't come to you and ask for general fund dollars. We need to, support ourselves out of the money that we raise from our millage and from the fees that people pay to use the facilities. Melissa.
Yeah. So another way that we're working with our local communities is through 2 grant programs that we've started in the last couple of years. The first is our Community Park and Trail Capital Grant Program. So we have awarded a little over $1 million in 2022, because that was 21 and 22 money combined, and then $650,000 just a few months ago to our local communities for a wide variety of things. The ask this year was close to $2 million, and we only had 652 awards, so we know that the need is there, and we're really happy to be able to work with our communities in this way and support some of those local park projects. So, we're funding trails, playgrounds, pocket parks, restroom facilities, a lot of accessibility improvements, sports courts. So it's been a really good combination of new park development, parks that didn't maybe have anything in the first place, kind of getting developed and getting opened, and a lot of renovation and replacement, a lot of fixing things that are broken or old or not accessible and bringing them up to where they need to be. So that's been really fun to see and work with the communities on that. The grants, they do have 3 years to complete the projects, so I'll show a few examples of some things that are getting done, but over the next few years, as they close out those grants, you'll see a lot more projects come to fruition. The other program is our Natural Resources Stewardship Grant Program. Focuses on climate resiliency, green infrastructure, biodiversity, and habitat restoration. So, these fund invasive species projects, native plantings, interpretation and education, lots of brush installation to get this invasive species off your boots before you leave the park, and a lot of natural community restoration. We also fund the public native plant program out of this pot, and we have a long-standing partnership with the Road Commission for Oakland County to do roadside Phragmites treatment as well with them. So really kind of capturing a wide variety of things under that umbrella, but yeah.
There's a lot here. There you go.
So just a couple of examples of some of the community projects, some really cool playgrounds in Auburn Hills and Birmingham, a sketch of what's to come at Wilson Park in Ferndale. The Oxford Farmers Market Pavilion was funded out of this program. And then just an example of our natural resources programs. This is our staff out in the traffic islands in Clawson, swapping out the landscaping for native plantings.
Great stuff. Charlie was at Birmingham ribbon cutting, if I recall.
Yep.
I missed the one at the park across the street from my house though, but.
Oh, shoot.
Well, more to come.
The Birmingham one was nice, the
Yeah,
Birmingham's nice.
for the one that you could walk to, right, probably it's called,
Yes.
yeah.
So just to summarize, these are some of the things that are kind of on our mind as big picture issues, challenges and opportunities. Rising costs, inflationary pressures, compensation increases, matched with the limited potential for revenue growth at some of our facilities. We have goals that we set to try to reach levels of financial self-sustaining operations. Fortunately, we made some changes to our golf fees and operations last couple of years, so now we finally have reached a point where golf is supporting itself. I think it's probably the first time in many, many years that that's been the case. Our water parks are very challenging in terms of making the finances work. The labor situation has been particularly difficult. I know you all have heard about lifeguard shortages. That's a nationwide problem. We have bounced back and we were able to open, when did we open? Early June this year?
Yep, early June, both parks.
And then unfortunately, then the weather didn't really cooperate with us. So, that kind of folds into the next issue, which is really resilience for extreme and unpredictable weather. And we're seeing that like everyone is, of course, but we're in the outdoor recreation business. So it does kind of hit home with us. So it, has reduced the number of operating days at some of our facilities. Thinking through, we've never had a situation where there was hazardous air quality before, and then just thinking it through, for our workforce that is out in the field, don't have the option of putting a mask and going inside. It's caused us to start to begin to think about procedures, how to handle this, how to get the word out to employees all throughout the county at all of our locations. Extreme heat and flooding, all of these things are on our minds, and so we need to adapt, and we need to adapt our facilities in order to deal with the realities of the world as we know it now and where we're going. We've made some gains in terms of supporting the county's carbon emission and sustainability goals. This year, we are buying our first robotic, fully electric mower and piloting it out at Lion Oaks. It's one thing if you're talking to your legislators, it would be great. They've put a lot of funding into EV charging and into electric vehicles, but there isn't any funding we can identify for things like landscaping equipment and and there could be incredible gains there if we were able to access some funding support from the federal or state government. In labor market competition, already been through that, and providing equitable services and reaching all the taxpayers who support us, local county parks. So we've made big steps forward with ARPA. I think there's still some areas of the county where we would like to expand our presence and reach. We have pending before the DNR Trust Fund Board, is that what they're called? Yeah. Turtle Woods is kind of the next one beyond ARPA that we hope to add to our park system family in northern Troy. Beautiful undeveloped area there that will be a nice nature preserve addition to our park system if we're successful with the DNR in getting them funding for acquisition.
We'll know in December.
We'll know in December. With that, thank you. Kind of hard to get mean to me now.
I know. That was a good plan, Chris.
Alright. Go back and see who's lined up here to ask questions.
Lining up.
Alright, we'll start with Commissioner Rahman, followed by Commissioner Smith Charles.
Thank you. Thank you. Great presentation. I think we all love parks. Living in Novi, I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to check out too many of them. I have gone to Red Oaks and the one down the street here, Waterford. Phenomenal, both of them. We took the kids actually for employee day or staff day, and they absolutely loved it. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. I thought it was well staffed, everybody was professional, just blown away. I didn't even realize Oakland County had a facility like that. And then just kind of the professionalism that we saw from everybody, including the lifeguards, was really fantastic. So just wanted to give you a plug and a shout out for having really good people and a good department.
Nice.
Chris, you and I have been talking, I would love to see eventually something come our way Selfishly, like in the southwest part of the county, I know we're talking about it, thinking about it, and I just wanted to officially put it on record that I'm hoping something like that is coming at some point. But you did talk a little bit about the addition of the new park space, and these new initiatives and things like that going on. Do you envision the need for some additional staffing or maintenance, and is that all sort of budgeted in? I know you're self-funded and sort of your own machine, if you will. But I just want to make sure that's taken into account.
Yeah, we did look at the operating costs as we assessed, putting together this plan before presenting to the commission. From a cost perspective, we have put together a game plan there that's pretty limited in terms of expense, comparable to other facilities. So most are very passive recreation facilities. They're not going to require a lot of daily staffing or seasonal employment, mostly just maintenance, grounds maintenance, and cleaning up the garbage and that type of thing. So, I think we came up with somewhere between $350,000 to $500,000 with all of the 4 park additions plus Turtle Woods coming in the future, which is not an insignificant amount, but we are being mindful of not taking on too much expense as far as that's concerned. And from our perspective, it's a worthwhile investment in order to expand our reach to communities where felt like they've been neglected and have a decent case to make.
Right, absolutely. I did also want to thank you for the grant program. You'd mentioned that. I know Commissioner Long and I had Bicentennial Park. We just got $100,000 for Commerce, so that was phenomenal as well. So thank you for that. I guess my only last question is, being that you're self-sustaining, it gives us very little to worry about or really consider. Is there anything from a budgetary or finance perspective that is on the wish list or want list that you feel like is missing, or something more that you could do?
We'll always take more money. Well, let me say, I think we're seeing a lot of climate issues impacting the world right now. It's actually potentially a benefit to Oakland County. They say that Michigan's going to be one of the #1 climate refuge destinations, and you think about Oakland County's strengths and the number of lakes and fresh water that we have in the county, that this could be something, while unfortunate overall, something we could lead into quite a bit. So there is no end to laudable, excellent investments that could be made in recreation. And even beyond recreation in some of these other areas where we have, increased our footprint, like invasive species control and tree canopy, all of those things. So if you're asking me a wish, I would love it if we could think about maybe putting another ballot initiative on the ballot that could allow us to really step up the investments that we're making in these areas. I think there's tremendous evidence that the public is very supportive of it. Our increased millage passed by almost the exact same amount it did at a lower level 10 years beforehand. So I think there is plenty of evidence that the folks in Oakland County would support and want to have more and more investment into recreation, both at the county level and the things that we're able to support the local governments in the natural resources management, sustainability.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Smith Charles, followed by Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes, so a lot of this, as I was talking with Chris Long about, we feel very close to and familiar with, so great. Thank you for mentioning Southfield Oaks in its infancy, Oak Park Woods. I'll throw Turtle Woods in there also. And just a thank you for listening when we visited the North Parks. And I just was like, this is amazing. These are amazing. Now, where are they south of M59? And, you really jumped in and listened to that and have really made huge strides. I can even think about grants. I think it may be what you were talking about, where Royal Oak Township has even been a benefactor of some playscapes, and so that's awesome. Keep up the good work. You answered my question about HR and the seasonal staff. It sounds like you're figuring out how to get rid of that bottleneck. So that's great. And if you need us to advocate for you, you know how to reach all of us, and we'd be happy to do that. Commissioner Rahman mentioned having not seen those northern parks. Jim was kind enough to tote us around, when we did our tour, so perhaps we could put something,
It's a great idea.
on the books. Yeah, and
Have to do that.
we're gonna have that foliage change coming soon. Perhaps we could even squeeze it in this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then last but not least,
We'll stop at Hoffman Farms at the end.
This is not crazy. Yes, let's think about doing that.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's a big-
last point I wanted to make was, if it's okay that I mention about Catalpa Oaks Pavilion. I wanted to make sure my commissioners were penciling out September 18th at 5:30 at Catalpa Oaks, where we will be renaming the pavilion after Senator Vincent Gregory, who was very instrumental. You'll hear all about it. Desiree Sansfield on your team, no stone unturned. I mean, she's thought of everything. We're so grateful for her. So if your schedules can permit, please come out. It'll be worth your time. And that's September 18th, 5:30. We'll send out some invites so that everyone knows. But just want to shout out the Gregory family and their impact to Catalpa Oaks.
Great guy. Okay, is that it? Commissioner Hoffman, followed by Commissioner Wiper.
Thank you. I have a question. Is there still conversation about moving the farmer's market to Pontiac?
Well, I would say it's a little bit been on pause. The third variable with the Phoenix Center project also kind of entered the conversation. And we know there's still much to be decided and developed with that. We've just kind of put it on pause. And we've put, initially this was initiated by a developer of a project that's planned for downtown. We've kind of put the ball in his court to come to us with a more detailed proposal so our commission can actually, assess the costs and the impact. So it's in discussion, Bob, but it hasn't really moved very far. We have been surveying and talking to our vendors. I think it's safe to say that they'd like to stay where they're at, as opposed to moving, with the picture that we at least can give them as of now.
Okay, next question. You know how I feel about government competing with free enterprise. And I discovered that you guys are renting a barn at Springfield Oaks to store people's motorhomes and boats. I don't agree with that.
So that's actually done through the 4-H.
Yeah, Fair Board.
The Fair Board does that. And we get a percentage of that for them using the barns.
Okay, I thought it was through the Parks and Rec.
No, it's usually run from, I think, October to April.
What revenue do you get or what do they generate in total?
What was it, like 10, 20?
How much?
I think when I'm
It's less
saying,
than 20.
it's less than 20, I'm gonna say probably about $10,000.
That your share?
That's what they pay to us. It's part of their essentially lease payment to utilize the fairgrounds. So it's part of our agreement with them.
Yeah, I
They
just
share the
don't,
parking income.
I just don't agree with them competing with free enterprise. It's just, you have a private company who pays property tax. That's why you know how I feel about golf courses. And I've probably said this before. Listen, the Pontiac Country Club pay, if they sell their hot dogs and tee-off time and beers for all the same price, they're upside down before they take in a dollar by probably 75 or 100 grand because they pay property taxes. I
What
don't think
private
that's
school
right.
did you go to, Bob?
Pardon?
What private school did you go to?
But what?
Nothing.
It's okay.
Go to a private
Trying to make a
school,
point.
yeah,
It's all right.
I did not, I went to.
Well, I mean, just say to your point, Commissioner, it does point to the importance of these types of facilities that are in a competitive situation with private facilities, that we not subsidize them with taxpayer funds. I mean, we have legacy facilities that I can't just wave a magic wand and have them go away. So things like golf, absolutely, we need to stay on top of them paying for themselves. Because what's even more unfair is to take a business that is competing against us and then us taking their tax dollars and then lowballing the price and pushing them out of the market, so.
Well, it's not right, and I don't know if you know, I was here in 1999 and I voted against Oakland County's tax subsidized daycare because that competed with free enterprise. It won any points with Brooks.
Not 1999, you weren't here before me.
As far as the banquet,
2005 maybe.
the banquet facilities,
Yeah.
banquet facilities is an issue for us.
2002.
As Commissioner mentioned, so we have a barn that is ironically the most popular, most successful event venue we have. Yet we have some very nice large banquet facilities that are attached to our golf courses that we have struggled over many, many years to achieve even minimal financial expectations. And Lion Oaks is one with, 400 some seating there.
It's a beautiful.
It's a beautiful facility, but the last time it was bid out for the catering contract, only one company was responsive, and they were really happy with very minimal bookings. They could make a profit at that. So it is something we really struggle with. You keep trying to think of different ways to approach it, creative things. I talked to the guy that owns Detroit Axe about maybe, opening a facility in one of our places. We talked to Carl's Golf Land about maybe taking over the space at White Lake. So we're always trying to come up with solutions to these things. I don't wanna have empty facilities, and I don't wanna use your tax dollars to heat and cool them.
Okay. You done, Commissioner Hoffman?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Commissioner Weipert, followed by Commissioner Cavell.
Thank you. Three things, just to follow up on Commissioner Rahman about Southwest. Part of the millage was trails, and I know in pocket parks, and I know South Line did pocket parks and Huron Valley Trail. Nobody's got an awesome trail that you can work with. It's part of the villages to encourage the trails and improve, so that's one. Two, with the Phoenix, you mentioned the Phoenix Center, the Pontiac at the Race grant, where I think they're gonna connect the trails. And that, $8 or $10 million grant, and it's gonna be right along the new properties. So will you cooperate and, I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
they wanna make green and walkable park area by the Ottawa Towers. Is that, the trail's gonna come through now?
That's awesome.
So are you guys gonna coordinate with that?
The regional trail management is actually done under economic development, so we tend to get pulled in under our grant program rather than being more of a proactive part of the conversation. But we did support the last Clinton River Trail project that came through that was partially ARPA funded. They had a funding gap that we filled in through our special projects fund, so.
And the last thing is, along with Commissioner Rowan, just talking about what do you need from us? In the very beginning, you said you might come to us about the proprietary ARPA or special revenue. You mean not come to us for money, but come to us for help on redefining? Is that what you meant? You weren't talking about money, you were talking about.
No, it really is kind of an arcane accounting thing. And the way we are designated is really more meant for something like a sewer and water fund where the fees pay for the upkeep of the infrastructure, whereas as you saw, we are 67% supported by a millage. So it just paints a skewed picture, and it takes money off the table that we could be spending to improve recreation artificially. So yes.
When they ask what you need help, you're gonna work on that?
Yes, yeah, we've been working with the administration. There's no action right now, but something we hope to accomplish.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Cavell.
Well, Phil kinda asked my questions. I was gonna ask to learn more about depreciation. It being 7% feels high, and my understanding of depreciation is somewhat limited, so I would love to, you tell us, cause depreciation from what I know is wear and tear on a laptop or something, right?
Phone a friend.
Well, what is? It's paying for replacements. When you buy a new playground, it's putting money aside basically back into a fund balance to replenish, to buy new playground equipment in the future, once that's totally depreciated. So it's basically a placeholder to buy new equipment later.
Does that include then the $1.9 million you're saying?
No, so the two of them added together tend to end at the end of the year, the total amount of money we're putting back into
Gotcha.
our net position. Fair to state?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Phil also mentioned trails. Is that of interest? I mean, you were talking about climate change and economic development and how do you bring the low house population, I mean, why aren't trails in your unit?
Well, that goes back to some history I'm not fully familiar with. I think that maybe 10 years ago plus,
More, yeah.
it was separated out and brought under economic development. And we work well with the team over there. We're happy to be involved in more, whatever the board and the county administration wants us to be involved in. And we have kind of branched a little bit into these areas that we haven't passed. The 9 Mile feasibility study, and Melissa can speak to that if you'd like. You know, we provide some matching funding with SEMCOG to bring the communities along 9 Mile from Farmington over to Hazel Park together to start the process of thinking about what a greenway or, you know,
Shared use path.
corridor, pedestrian corridor would be like, which would be great, because you look at what the Joe Louis Greenway is doing coming up to our border. We don't want that to stop there. We want the, you know, good stuff to continue, so.
Is there any, I mean, like if, I guess, would more or less money be going to trails if something was different?
Well, so the planning is what happens at economic development. They don't have dedicated funding for the trails, to actually construct the trails. And
It's more coordination,
Yeah, it's
grant
coordination.
writing, that kind of support.
So they'll help communities apply for grants and help pull together, you know, the groups that are supporting the different trails. So, we don't have endless supplies of funding.
Sure.
You know, as Melissa mentioned, we had $2 million in great applications for local grants, but then we also have to kind of balance that, because we can't come to you and say, hey, we need more money. So we've tried to limit our overall grant program so that we don't overexpose ourselves financially.
Sure.
Chris, is that, is that Sean, who runs that? I'm just curious, you said economic development, is that Sean Carlson or is that?
Sean is the deputy over at the economic development director, used to be Ingrid, but I'm sorry, I don't know who the director is now.
I don't know what Brett Raskin's title is currently, but.
Brett Razigan is the manager of the area, and
Kristen
Like Chris
Malloy.
is?
Yeah,
Okay,
Kristen is
got it.
the point person,
yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense.
I'd start with
That makes sense, yeah.
Commissioner, is that it? Yeah. Okay. I had a couple of things. So thinking about out in our end of the world, where there is no county park except Lion Oaks, which is way the heck out there, but, you know, and it's specifically, it is growing and there's more there than just a golf course, which is great.
we have a little bit in Wixom.
Commerce.
I know.
Yeah,
No
is
credit there.
is there any possibility that maybe you pick up a municipal park and turn it into a county park?
I
Is that part of the discussion?
Well, I think we found a way to kind of break the problem that's always kind of held local county parks back, because the land isn't really available in these more developed parts of the county, and it's always been the reason why you know, the park land had been expanded and built upon in the north end of the county. But we have a lot of great parks in other areas of the county, and often in communities that are bearing a pretty sizable amount of the financial burden of providing recreation, whereas, you know, we provide support to like a community like Independence Township, where Independence Oaks is really, you know, it's incredibly popular and well utilized by the residents of Independence Township. So it would be great if we could, over time, expand our footprint to be more present in communities. Like Novi, Farmington Hills is another, we have a golf course there, but not a park. Rochester Hills is another, it'd be great when Turtle Woods comes online, because Troy is I think the largest community in the county and does not currently have a park. You know, we'd like to be everywhere. It's all about financing and figuring out how to do it. But partnering with local government seems to be the way to make it happen, and we started those conversations with Novi. And I'm hopeful that things are gonna go in a positive direction there.
You're right about there not being a lot of green space out there for parks. I mean, I appreciate the forward thinking of the people 50 years ago did set aside some of this stuff because we know some of them would be developments with million-dollar homes around a private lake. And instead, they're public county parks. And that's really important to me because access should be for everybody. But I would like to keep those conversations going. I mean, out on the southwest end, we're talking about either Phil's district or Christine's or Ajay's or mine. Somewhere in there, there's gotta be a pony, you know? Some piece of property or some park that would benefit by becoming part of the county park system. And I really wanna see that continue. I have a specific trail I would like to see really seriously looked at, and we've talked about it. The residents where I am and in Ajay's district, they'd like to be able to ride their bike around Walled Lake, right? Third biggest lake in Oakland County. You literally cannot walk around it or ride a bike around it without, stumbling and that sort of thing. And the piece of it that is not constructed and doesn't have roads on it is actually an old road from back in the 1910s, 20s that ran along the west side of Wall Lake. And if you go back there, there's remnants of that old road. So, I mean, that's the kind of discussion I think we need to have with what can the city do, what can the county do, hooking up with the other trail system. If you could hook that into the other trail system that exists already around us, that would be a big feature. So I'm glad you're thinking about looking at stuff that already exists and maybe repurposing or finding that. But if you look at a, overhead of our part of the county, there's still not a whole lot of available open green space, even though it seems like it, there's really not. So thank you for continuing to look at those kinds of things. And Chris Long.
Now she sparked a comment. Are you outside?
I'm done.
Okay. Well, I was just, to bring up for, Chairperson Markham, that OCC is a good, but.
We were there, that meeting.
OCC is going to be for sale on Highland, or it's Waterford. The Highland campus, by 25, they want it sold. It's a huge piece of property. Many people walk their dogs there now. It's a lot of open space at OCC, so we have talked about, but maybe a dog park, little piece of it there, but Waterford, I have 4 precincts in Waterford are so bent on putting it, getting back on the tax roll for houses. So that it might be difficult. I'm hoping maybe a dog park on a little bit of it. It's a really nice open space. The beginning, when you pull into OCC, there's huge green space and open space. People walk the dogs, people play baseball, so people kind of use it for a park, some of it already. I would hate to see it all be houses, but that is, I get calls because I'm on parks and maybe because I'm out that way, well, that's my district now too, yeah, I gotta remember that. But it is all up to the Waterford Township Board, so I'm hoping maybe a little piece of that can remain open space maybe, so they're aware of it too. So just to bring that up to attention to fellow commissioners here, there's might be some green space available there and that would be a good spot, but.
Residents in the area are getting very organized and.
Yes, they are.
We met with a group of them last night just to find out what their objectives were and how the progress they've made. Which I think you're correct, so the township really has to be.
Right.
And the OCC Board of Trustees really need to be on board, because it's already difficult enough to try to pull something off.
Right.
Like this, especially in the time frame.
But their group is getting very well organized, but that's what I said too, they gotta start at the Waterford Township. I could say, yeah, I wanted a dog park, but Waterford Township's got that in their hands, so.
Be a great location.
It is a great
It's
location. next
next to a large township park, Hess Hathaway, and Elizabeth Lake Woods is not too far away, and beautiful Hoffman Nursery is right around.
Yeah, right on Hospital Road there.
That's right. You know why it's called Hospital Roads, anybody know?
There must have been a hospital there.
It used to be the
There used to be a-
TB sanitarium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OCC was
Oh,
a
yeah.
TB center,
Yep.
you guys know that.
My kid's grandma was there, with TB.
Commissioner Cavell, you had a question?
I just wanted to ask, is the group that you met with that's organizing in favor of more
Yes.
parks?
Yes,
They would like,
yes,
they
some
would
open
like
space.
as much of it to be preserved for public recreation as possible. There's a number of buildings, of course, on the campus.
There's still a lot of open space.
Probably be a little outside of what we necessarily would be looking for.
Have they talked to the Housing Trust Fund manager who could help them create dense development that would also preserve recreation space? Little bit of both?
We will forward her contact info.
Do
her
it, please
contact
do,
info.
please do, that'll be great.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up too, and it sounds like they're active, they're calling
Yeah.
it still, so that might be something in the future maybe, hopefully.
Yeah. Melissa served on a SEMCOG green infrastructure group. They came out with a recommendation that we should have a regional park facility every 5 miles
Oh.
radius. I think it's a pretty good benchmark to try to hit.
Do you know what we're at now?
We are at 76%. I just had them run
Oh,
that
okay.
actually, with the ARPA projects coming online.
Oh,
Nice,
oh, that's good, that's pretty
Turtle
good,
Woods will knock off
76% of that goal,
Sizable
that's
chunk
good.
of that. Yeah, it's great.
We will be at 76% after the ARPA projects.
Every 5 miles, we're at 76%, that's good,
That is a good.
that's an interesting fact.
Last call for a question for Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Wonderful
you
job by all,
For coming, yeah, we
on a day-to-day basis, they're great team there
really
at Hearts.
appreciate being here. I do wanna thank the fiscal folks who have sat through all the meetings.
I don't know how you don't fall asleep, but very good.
I love this stuff, I don't know.
Lots of coffee.
I like numbers.
Really appreciate it. So with that, I
not
will
boring either,
open
run.
up the meeting for public comment. Is there anybody that cares to address this meeting
It's been a long
from the public?
job.
Seeing no one, I will close public comment. And is there any other business?
We may have to tell you about Lion Township.
If I could just remind commissioners that this does conclude our budget hearings. Congratulations. As I did walk Commissioner Rahman through as, a new commissioner, just from, years past, you still obviously have the opportunity to follow up with departments one-on-one, or even if you let Chair Markham know, or myself, we will organize departments to come before us even during budget wrap-up, as late as that. If you look at your calendars, you'll notice that we do have budget wrap-up scheduled. Please try to get with your caucus and then with staff following that, if you have any amendments that you would like to provide during that budget wrap-up conversation, but we will.
Can you just clarify, like, obviously I've never sat through it, what is budget wrap-up? Can you just sort of explain what happens between now and then?
Yep, Kyle, from now to then, there will be discussions in caucus about the budget, and we can have those one-on-one meetings, as well as even scheduling a workshop for a special finance meeting if necessary.
Okay.
But then at budget wrap-up, Kyle, Jen, and the fiscal services team will come back up, explain to you what amendments they need to, as I think Commissioner Markham usually says, massage the budget through the discussions that have been had here in this room. And we'll walk through those. There's also some personnel amendments that come through at that time, so we'll walk you through those and talking about how those affect the budget. And then we'll go through any board, amendments that I just discussed that come from the different caucuses or individual board members.
So we'll reconvene as the finance group again on the
Yes.
6th, do
Yes.
the same thing, and then go.
And so instead of having necessarily individual departments, it'll really be Kyle, Jen, and the fiscal services team that are sitting here answering questions and
It's like
helping us guide us
ABC.
through.
Isn't there ABC for amendments, and it would be printing out, they'll give you a printed copy of what we're adding to the
And
budget.
what Commissioner Long is referencing, and we can show you, even you have access on the iPads there at home, is just even the agenda from the last year's wrap-up might be helpful. We labeled them Section A,
Right.
that's the first amendment, then Section B was the second
C,
amendment, so.
And then the stuff will be included under those.
Yep, so we try to break it down, so it's not just one big amendment to do all those massage amendments we just, discussed. It'll be nice and
What is one,
concise.
human resources,
What is that?
B,
Amendment
something.
A, B, and C is,
Oh, yeah.
Amendment A
We don't have
is
anything next week though, do we?
personnel, B, wait,
We'll print that out, cause I
B is
don't
human
know off the top of my
resources,
head.
I think, B is human
But there's
resources,
three
maybe.
sections,
Yeah.
one is from fiscal services,
One
one
is
is from
hu-
mainly HR
HR.
and is personnel. And then that third one is any of those board amendments that we've
Yeah.
discussed.
Oh yeah, I think it's like
So the
B is
changes
even.
we implement, so like when they come and present to
And I
us,
think A
and
is
they say, look,
financial.
here's A, B, C, D, E are all the things we want to
Lago on there is tentative too.
Are
in my
we
book.
putting input into, hey, can we do like A and B at least, or I guess, or is that all coming from Kyle Jen and team? Where does?
Are we adjourned?
No, this was just
No, we are
over
not
other-
adjourned.
other
Should we
business.
be?
I think that's a
we're
great
doing
question
other
for your
business.
committee chair, offline.
Thank you. Good point.
So thank you, commissioners.
All right,
Anybody else? I call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.
now I got, are you leaving?